January 21st, 2020 meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. Please stand for the invocation. Ms. Fiedler will lead.
This evening, I'd like to share a quote from Mother Teresa. "The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. The fruit of service is peace."
Thank you, Ms. Fiedler. Mr. Pruski has Boy Scouts for the pledge.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We're joined this evening by Scout Troops 804 and 192. They're actually going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if they've come forward, I think Joanne can show them on this other side of the dais, and then we'll have you guys start. That'd be great for coming.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much for coming out this evening.
Madam Secretary, please read the ethics statement.
The Ethics Commission is asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The Chairman of the Ethics Commission is asked that those present review the Ethics Commission information in the foyer of these chambers. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, speakers should contact the Ethics Commission in the Heritage Office Complex on Riva Road.
Thank you. We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council briefly on any subject not included in the printed agenda. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I do have a few folks signed up. I'm going to call the first page. Please, when you're called, come up, take a seat, state your name and address for the record. I have Mr. Stephen Waddy, Mr. Bill Lambrose, Mr. Art Holt, Mr. Philip Ateto, Ms. Anna Barber, and Ms. Lisa Van Buskirk. Mr. Waddy.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Waddy. I live at 7968 Heathermas Drive in Severn, Maryland. I decided to speak at this time to first of all thank the council for their various ears and conversations over the past 2 weeks. A week ago, I had a great conversation with a friend in Glen Burnie about what my purpose was. Much of our discussion was around what our ancestors would think of us in this moment in time. How do we communicate with our ancestors to help them heal from the trauma that they have experienced, and how do we move forward in a positive way? That was a great conversation that I had. After our last council meeting where we discussed my name being mentioned in a relationship with a bill that I will be speaking on later, I became somewhat angered, and I felt the need to correct the record regarding my name on that bill. I calmed down a bit and sent an email to Councilwoman Hare on Tuesday the 7th requesting an apology for attaching my name to the amendment. She apologized and stated that she really meant no harm and that she was actually following some political advice. I accept her apology on that note. Thank you. However, a few days later, after reviewing the video, my anger resurfaced again, and I sent an email to all of the councilors stating that they acted disingenuously in voting for the amendment, and that the addition of the amendment was not done in good faith. In that anger, in that email I sent to the council, and I specifically mentioned you, I'm sorry. I had already received a written apology from you, and I did accept it. I didn't think about how my email, my second email, would affect you at the time, and I do apologize for that, because I should have taken your word at first. In this political moment, and in this moment in time, for those that have taken the time to talk to me, and those that I haven't, I consider you my neighbors. I don't consider you my enemies. The NAACP is not your enemy. I am not your enemy. We should not get to this point where we have to have laws with 18 different categories. We should not be at this point. I can tell you, why we are at this point, though. We have turned our every relationship into a transactional.
Thank you, Mr. Waddy. Mr. Lambros?
Yeah. Well, tonight, looks like the agenda is pretty full, but a lot of real estate bills you all have been passing. But a year ago, I went to this county council and asked about homeowners associations. Right now, the county has probably 30–40% of the homeowners here are now involved with a HOA or a condo association, condo managers, and no one's overseeing them. There's no licensing requirement by the state, none by the county council or from the county. So I'm asking for this evening that sometime in the year 2020, Montgomery County has an excellent program for homeowners associations and how they arrange disputes, resolutions for their homeowners and their county. This county deserves the same respect. We should have it here, okay? Now, I'm here because of the fact that I'm involved with a lawsuit against a community in Heritage Harbor, okay? And to this day, that community still has the belief they can put rules, their HOA rules, on county roads that they don't own. The county owns the roads. I'm not sure what you all can do about that. Just want to touch on that topic. But I'm asking that the county council this year, hopefully, can pass something pertaining to homeowners associations, condo associations, and their managers. And I'll cut it short for tonight.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Art Holt?
Hi, my name's Arthur Holt. I live at 8 Fisk Circle in Annapolis. Thank you for your attention tonight and for the weeks past. I am here to encourage you to draft a resolution for the county in favor of House Bill H.R. 1384, Medicare for All. I'd like to read from a quote from the Martin Luther King's I've Been to the Mountaintop. Now, let me say, as I move to my conclusion, that we've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point in Memphis. We've got to see it through. And when we have our march, you need to be there. If it means leaving work, if it means leaving school, be there. Be concerned about your brother. You may not be on strike, but either we go up together or we go down together. Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness. And later in the speech he said, the question is not, if I stop to help this man in need, what will happen to me? The question is, if I do not stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to them? That's the question. And so, of course, we know what happened within 24 hours of this speech to Dr. King. And so I'm asking that, again, it's a stretch to say that the town hall this Sunday, the Medicare for All town hall at the Stanton Center, is, even approaches anything like the significance of the strike that was just coincident with his death. But I wonder if we could all just be there to learn, because we don't know who the next person is going to be without health care.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ateto?
Hello, Philip Ateto, 1800 Poplar Avenue here in Annapolis. Hello again, friends. I noticed that most, if not all of you, attended some sort of event honoring the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. over the weekend, and I'm wondering if you're aware of what he had to say about health care. Quote, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health care is the most shocking and inhumane, end quote. As we've hopefully highlighted for you with our testimonies over the past few months here, our current system is rife with inequality, lack of access, and medical bills remain the top reason for bankruptcies and financial ruin of families and individuals. I feel like those of you who don't support single payer, it's because you aren't educated thoroughly on it and fear backlash from your constituents who also don't understand it. This is understandable. Huge amounts of corporate money is being spent to inject misinformation and fear into the healthcare conversation regarding single payer, but the health insurance and pharmaceutical companies and the many organizations and operatives they prop up to maintain our current healthcare non-system. If If you truly want to honor the legacy of Dr. King, you owe it to yourselves and your constituents to educate yourselves on the solutions for us to get the healthcare system we need and deserve. This is one last reminder and personal invite to attend our Coalition's Medicare for All Forum this Sunday, the 26th, 2 to 4 p.m. at the Stanton Center, short walk from here. We'll have experts speak on what single payer is and plenty of time for a Q&A to answer people's questions and concerns. I encourage you to bring your questions and concerns because I once had many, but the more I learned and studied this issue over the past several years, the more it became clear that single payer is the solution, and I'm pretty certain it will for you too. Although it'll be best for you to be there in person so you can ask questions if you can't be there, there will be a live stream of the event at the Maryland Progressive Healthcare Coalition so you can tune in from wherever you happen to be on Sunday. Healthcare is consistently a top issue of concern in our local community, and the forum will be opened up by the county executive as he understands the urgency and local impact of healthcare on our community and economy. I hope you'll come out and vaccinate yourselves on the misinformation about single payer, and that you'll then use the power of your seats to add your voices to help us get the equitable, humane healthcare system we need and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anna Barber.
Hi, my name is Anna Barber, and I live at 1007 Timber Creek Drive. I'm a junior at South River High School, and I'm here today representing the future business leaders of America. We have over 3,000 students in Maryland and over 250,000 in the U.S. Even though business is in the name, it's not just business and marketing classes that are a fit. Competitive events and leadership opportunities in information technology, cybersecurity, health and bioscience, hospitality, and many more are available for students to become better at what they love and what they are interested in as a career. This year, we started a brand new FBLA chapter at South River. Our goal this year is to win the Chapter of the Year award for Maryland and be recognized as a Gold Seal chapter to be recognized by the National FBLA organization. Me and other members of our officer team attended the National Fall Leadership Conference this year. I was able to meet many other members of FBLA from all around the country and was able to attend workshops which enriched my leadership skills. As an FBLA chapter, we complete a community service project. This year, we worked with the Salvation Army to provide underprivileged children with Christmas gifts. At our regional competition this year, we had 45 students advance to the State Leadership Conference. The average cost of the State Leadership Conference is $400 for the 2-night, 3-day conference in Baltimore, and the average cost of the National Leadership Conference is $1,000 for the 3-night, 4-day conference in Salt Lake City. We want to have the same opportunities as students around Maryland and the U.S. that have long-standing community support. We promise to win at our events and represent Anne Arundel County and South River, but we need help. We need tax-deductible sponsorships to our school for us to purchase uniforms and pay for transportation and hotel accommodations. I am here today on behalf of South River FBLA to ask for your help in supporting me and my 100 South River FBLA peers to prove ourselves on a national stage. Please send a note via email to southriverfbla@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Van Buskirk.
Good evening, County Council. Lisa Van Buskirk at 1053 Cars Wharf Road in Edgewater. I'm here to observe the 8th anniversary of the founding of the Start School Later chapter, but more importantly, as it relates to you, the 5th anniversary of Resolution 6-15 passed by the previous County Council unanimously, urging Anne Arundel County Public Schools to purchase school bus software and act expeditiously to implement safe and healthy school hours. Obviously, because I'm attending a meeting tomorrow in which the first school start times will be discussed for the first time since September 2016, expeditiously was unfortunately a little overly optimistic. And I urge you and anyone else in this room to read the recently released transportation report. It is incredibly eye-opening, and it validates everything we suspected when we look at mostly empty school buses, and the inefficient routing, and a whole host of other problems that I didn't even begin to understand. So there are 27 recommendations over 179 pages, but it is a good read, I promise you. And while number 27 and the school start time recommendations that are included in therein are most important to me, I also think that 1 through 26 will also be relevant to you. So thank you.
Thank you. That is the last of individuals who signed up prior to the meeting. Oh, thank you. If anyone who did not sign up and who wishes to speak, you may come forward to the table, state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing no movement, the invitation to audience is now closed. Is there any item any council member would like to place on the agenda? Yes, sir.
Which bill is it? Okay, I'd like to add my name as a co-sponsor. My apologies to Bill 120, just for the record. I emailed staff, but I have to get it on the record, so
Yes.
make it official. Thank you.
And Madam Secretary, I would like to remove my name as a sponsor of Bill number 9219.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Radvian.
I would also like to remove my name as a co-sponsor of Bill 92-19. Thank you.
May I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment to a bill or resolution, or minutes constitutes the reading of a whole?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of the December 16th, 2019 meeting.
The meeting was called to order by Chairman Allison Pickard at 7 p.m. Mr. Pruski asked for a moment of silence to recognize those who serve in the military overseas, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 16th meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. The minutes of the December 16, 2019 meeting stand approved as read, excuse me. Madam Secretary, please read the title of the bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 420, an ordinance concerning current expense budget, Board of Education, supplementary appropriation, and transfer of funds. Bill number 520, an ordinance concerning zoning, administrative hearings, variances, resource conservation area. Bill number 620, an ordinance concerning zoning, residential districts, Waterman's commercial use.
Thank you. It's my understanding we have no new resolutions being introduced this evening. May I have a motion to suspend the rules to hear and vote on resolution number 220 and bill number 9719 first and out of order this evening?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
On the motion to...
On the motion to suspend the rules to hear and vote on Resolution 220 and Bill Number 9719, first and out of order.
Okay. Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacey?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. The motion to suspend the rules to hear and vote on resolutions number 220 and bill number 9719, first out of order and first tonight, is adopted. Or passed.
Thank you. This first piece of legislation we will be hearing tonight concerns a topic that may be difficult for some people. I wanted to let people watching from home know that Resolution 220 concerns the topic of suicide as a public health issue. We will be discussing this, and there may be public testimony that may be hard to hear. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution 220.
Resolution 220, resolution declaring suicide a public health crisis in Anne Arundel County and requesting the Department of Health take immediate steps to identify residents affected by mental illness and offer adequate treatment and services to help those affected and at risk of death by suicide.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call on the sponsor, Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief so that we can move this along because I know there are quite a few folks here who want to speak on this resolution this evening, so I'll save my remarks for a little later. But I do just want to note that I had an opportunity to listen to the discussion at the work session, both from the administration and from my colleagues. I've had extensive discussions with a number of my colleagues on this resolution and some things that we can do to potentially make it more inclusive, to ensure that we're covering all of the individuals that we want to make sure we're addressing who have been affected by death by suicide. With that said, as I said, will reserve the balance of my comments for a little later.
Thank you. Would the administration like to weigh in on this resolution at this time?
We would be happy to. First, let me introduce myself and
correct.
the folks at the table. My name is Pete Barron with the County Exec. With me from our Department of Health is Dr. Nilesh Kalina-Raman from Office of Law, Ms. Blair Klausmeyer, and Chief of Police. we'd be happy to answer any questions the council has. I understand there will be some amendments. We're happy to discuss at the appropriate time.
Do I have any questions from my colleagues here on the council? Okay. We will now open the public hearing. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I do have a few pages of names, so will the following persons please come to the table and state your name and address for the record? Mr. Stephen Waddy, Ms. Celeste Anderson, Kurt Svensson, Jillian Amadio, Dean DeCamera, and Patrick Finn. I'm sorry if I've not gotten your name right. Mr. Waddy.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Stephen Waddy, 7968 Heather Miss Drive, 7 Maryland. My comment is about the section regarding the circumstances of gun violence. I think that's this fifth whereas on the resolution. Thank you. Our society is experiencing a renaissance in terms of gun purchasing. I live close to a gun range in Severn. I was really indifferent to the gun range before Parkland High School was affected with its murderous rampage. After Parkland, my neighbors at the gun shop put up a sign that said self-control, not gun control. I wish that they had met the women who I have met who have died from gun violence at the hands of their spouses. One who then committed suicide, and the spouse who committed suicide and left their child to roam the park. And my classmate Nina deserved better. And I have other friends as well that have lost their lives at the hands of gun violence. And I think that this resolution needs a little bit of work to be able to give proper respect to those who may have been victims or know victims or families within the families of people who have suffered from gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Celeste Anderson.
Good evening. My name is Celeste Anderson, 1149 Locust Tree Drive, Annapolis, Maryland. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight and share my thoughts on this bill. Saturday, September 28, 2019, exactly 115 days ago, our family experienced the devastating loss of our son, Noah Anderson. He struggled with mental illness, and ultimately, we lost him to suicide. He was 14 years old and a 9th grader at Brown Neck High School. He was handsome, he was funny, he was an artist, and he was so witty. The pain of losing Noah is immeasurable, and he is so missed. Yes, suicide is an epidemic. It's a crisis, and I applaud any legislation that brings that to the forefront. I'm here to remind you, though, that suicide is not a gun issue. It's a mental health issue. And I'm here to, and Noah's story could easily be your child's story. Never would I imagine that I would be here talking to you today and saying what I'm about to say. Since there is a time limit, I'll keep it brief, but I hope this does not limit Noah's impact on tonight. Roughly 3 years ago, Noah began showing signs of depression and anxiety. If you're a parent, you will know the overwhelming feeling of desperately trying to help your child and finding every resource available. Let me tell you, the system is broken. I called every psychiatrist after psychiatrist, office after office, and was told over and over, doctors were either not accepting new patients or Noah was going on a 3-month waiting list. This went on over a year and pleading for help. He was hospitalized twice at Shepherd Pratt on extended stays. Many times we had to call the police and have him escorted to the hospital for observation between these long waits for these psychiatrists. He endured being seen by subpar professionals, and he was being heard. He wasn't being heard. He suffered silently, and we were lost.
Thank you. Mr. Svensson.
My name is Kurt Svensson. I live at 934 Juliet Court. The subject of suicide is deeply personal for me in a number of ways. Nevertheless, I feel compelled to share publicly in an effort to break down the barriers of shame and taboo. Within the past few weeks, I learned that someone I played football with in high school recently died of suicide. Mike is the reason I'm here before you tonight. The data on the subject of suicide is dramatic, particularly for men and the age group of 45 to 54. Over the past 10 years, the suicide rate among males has increased from 18 to 22 per 100,000. For males aged 45 to 54, the rate is now 30 per 100,000. That age group boasts the highest rate of all age groups, both male and female. On a more personal note, I have had serious thoughts of committing suicide at different periods throughout my life. At least twice, those periods of time were so intense that I made specific plans about how best to do it. I believe 3 things prevented me from doing so: knowledge that I was and am loved, professional therapy and medication, and just plain dumb luck. The night I learned of Mike's death by suicide, I resolved to combat suicide by being better about making my love for others known and encouraging others to get professional help. I can't help with the dumb luck part. But what can Anne Arundel County government do? As a major employer, one practical thing we can do is clean up our own backyard by improving the disparity in access to mental health care compared with physical health care within the county's own employer-sponsored health plans. The county's mental health plan is a stepchild to the overall health plan. The vast majority of quality mental health providers do not participate through Magellan. The psychologists and psychiatrists that were instrumental in saving my life and that I still see on a regular basis are paid entirely out of my pocket. This is not anecdotal experience. National data supports it, and I have links to that data that I'd like to share with you all.
Thank you. Can you share them? Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Madam Chair.
Oh.
Ms. Anderson, if you have a typed version of your testimony, can you send it to me and we'll... I do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jillian Amadio, I'm sorry.
I don't know how to say it.
Okay.
Jillian Amadio, 1198 Latrobe Drive. I am an Annapolis-based mother of 2 and founder of Moms for Mental Health, a community of support for women and their families who are struggling, have struggled, or have been touched in some way by the effects of mental illness. I'm here today to express my full support for the resolution declaring suicide a public health crisis. Lives lost to suicide will never be forgotten, and their absence in this world will be forever felt. Our community has been touched deeply by the losses that are becoming all too frequent. I fully understand that we as a county have a plethora of resources, but I'm not naive enough to think that these resources alone will save our most vulnerable. Long wait times and high costs are ineffective. Many individuals who are suffering from depression, anxiety, and other mental health-related issues are encouraged to reach out. But what happens when their mental health issues have such a strangling grip on them that they're unable to do so? I can't begin to tell you the amount of messages we get each day saying something like, "I need help, I can't do this anymore, but I don't know where to begin." Sometimes when we're at our weakest, we need someone to reach down and pull us up and put us back together, because no matter how many resources are available, we simply don't have the strength to reach out ourselves. We need to ensure that in conjunction with the abundant resources we have at our disposal, we also find ways to reach out to those who need them. We can't wait for those struggling to come to us. We need to reach them where they are. If a person was dangling from a cliff, trapped in rough waters, or suffering from a heart attack, we wouldn't wait for them to reach out for help. We recognize their struggles and meet them with aid. The signs and symptoms of mental health crisis are not nearly as glaring as the signs of a physical struggle, but we must do what we can to recognize someone in need of help and make an attempt to meet them where they are. When our sisters and brothers don't have the strength to fight, we need to be the ones to do the fighting for them and pull them back to a place of hope and love. When we go to our primary care or our children see their pediatricians, we should have better screening, deeper conversations, and a personal connection that strives to really understand answers to the questions like, how are you? Are you okay? And are you struggling with anything? One of the greatest things our group does is Sunday check-ins, where we simply ask, how are you? What's going on? This simple outreach is sometimes exactly what people need to tell their story, share their struggles, and get the assistance they need. I remember in high school, our counselors would say things like, stress management is important.
Thank you. Mr. DeCamara?
My name is Dean DeCamara, and I'm a volunteer with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and suicide is a crisis. It's the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, 2017. We lost more than 47,000 people to suicide. It is the number 2 cause of death, adolescents aged 10 to 14. Let that sink in. It is the number 11 leading cause of death in Maryland. 2017, we lost 630 in Maryland, and 95 were Anne Arundel County residents. Well, I find these statistics daunting. My interest is personal. July 23, 2005, I lost a brother to suicide. He was a member of the volunteer fire community for more than 26 years and a quartermaster of the county fire department. More than 20,000 times, he responded to calls for service from our community. 15 years later, the pain of the loss is still real. Every Monday for 15 years, my mom and dad drive from 30 miles on the Eastern Shore to a small cemetery in Odenton and ask why. This is a crisis. You have to admit it. We've all done the Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation. I challenge each and one of you on this dais, if you have more than 1 degree of separation between suicide, attempt suicide, or mental health, I guarantee there's not one of you that can say you have more than 1. If that doesn't speak that this is a crisis, nothing does. We have an opportunity to do something. Do it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Patrick Finn.
Thank you very much for letting me speak. I'm speaking on behalf of NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and also on a personal note as well. I myself have struggled with PTSD, bipolar 1 with psychotic features, and eating disorder, and multiple signs of depression as well. Most every night I struggle with violent thoughts and violent visions that I can't escape my head. But one of the most important things that I want to stress is especially removing the stigma of mental illness from not just the media, but from society, is that these things are taboo and harshly to speak of, because 2 out of 3 people that struggle with depression never seek treatment. And depression is the leading cause of suicide in our country and in the world, most likely. Now, by allowing us to talk honestly and professionally about these issues, we can definitely make a difference. People behind closed doors will not be afraid to share what they're going through, because the fact of it is we are not alone. The most important thing I think is that people try to compare pain. Pain is not unique. People are. We each have a story we deserve to be told and heard about. Now, by being a facilitator and advocate for this, for NAMI, I have the privilege to help those people like the common for my members to tell their story, tell how their week is, because these people may not even have the money for treatment, but they can speak in a community of people that understand that pain is real, but so is hope. We have that hope by people that are struggling just like them. No one's alone. No one will be forgotten, and we are all loved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This panel is dismissed, and we have, I believe, one more person who signed up, Heather Martinko. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Heather Martinko. I live at 1211 Viking Drive North in Arnold. I'm with Patrick, although we didn't get to sit here together. I'm one of the facilitators for the National Alliance on Mental Illness peer-to-peer support group. We meet weekly at Gloria Day Church, so Sundays 6 to 7:30, and I've been facilitating at that meeting for about 3.5 years now. I guess I heard a lot of good stuff, and I really just want to echo what everyone else is saying. I get a little anxiety, so that's why I have my marble. The thing that I think has been more impactful to me of recently is that I have a 19-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter, and with their mental health struggles, be it depression, anxiety, things like that, there's a lot of stigma with the peers and not wanting to go to the guidance counselors, and some of the teachers do the diffusers, essential oils and things like that in the classrooms, but it's not a normal thing that everyone should do, except now they're doing something cool like mindful minutes and things like that. But my daughter in particular is struggling with anxiety every day and every night now, and it's increasing. And so with Jillian, we've tried to come up with something for the youth and we're going to hopefully start that soon, where it's kind of like a hangout where they can sit and swap coping skills or have a pizza party, things like that. The NAMI programs and the stuff that Moms for Mental Health with Jillian is all free. Another interaction I've had was with the crisis intervention training. I've been very fortunate to have part in that and teach them about my journey living with mental health challenges. And that, I can't speak, I couldn't even say where to begin, but that was one of the things about 3 years ago that gave me hope, because there's a stigma between police officers and people with mental health conditions and what looks obvious and what's not. But one thing to remember, and echoing what Patrick said, is that we're all human. So part of what gives us hope is human connection. Someone saying, me too, I have that going on too. So thank you for letting me be here and share that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was all the names of folks signed up to speak. Is there anyone who did not sign up and who wishes to speak? If so, come forward and state your name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes each.
Okay. My name is Robert Herman. I live at 211 Clay Street in Annapolis. I'm a psychiatrist. I've lived and worked in Anne Arundel County since 1996. I'm also on the Legislative Affairs Committee of the Maryland Psychiatric Society, which is the local district branch of the American Psychiatric Association. I'm speaking in support of this resolution. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for those under 40. The vast majority of those suffer from psychiatric illness such as depression and bipolar disorder. Treatment is effective, and suicide is preventable. Access to effective treatment remains a problem for many of those who suffer from psychiatric illness. If this resolution is passed, we at MPS stand ready to assist and advise the county on effective strategies to address this serious public health crisis.
Thank you, sir.
And can I submit this?
I'm Heather Bagnall, 967 Phillips Drive, Arnold, Maryland. First of all, I wanted to applaud Councilman Volke for his willingness to take up the mantle of destigmatizing mental illness. His Capital Gazette op-ed, in which he confirmed that though the narrative has reportedly asserted that there were no gun owners on the gun violence task force, he himself is a responsible gun owner and on the task force, and I appreciate his willingness to share a very personal connection to suicide. I, too, have had a front row seat to mental health issues, both privately and very publicly, amongst family, friends, colleagues, and students. Just last year during the session, because I am a delegate, I attended 5 funerals, 3 of which were deaths by suicide. And I have written and spoken and worked extensively to address the needs for greater services and resources, particularly as part of my work on the health and government operations, but also with a clear intention to make sure that we were constantly decoupling mental illness from gun access and gun violence. However, I am concerned about the narrow scope of this resolution. Though Mr. Volke is correct that 67% of gun deaths are by suicide, 100% of gun deaths are by firearms, and it is important that we recognize that as we try and determine the best actions going forward. Suicide is a crisis, but lack of access to mental health services and unrestricted access to firearms are 2 very real causes. When we talk about suicide prevention, we are talking about time, stretching out time from consideration to action, from action to outcome. Mental illness identification, stabilization, treatment, and recovery take time, time which can be offered by restricting access to the tools of suicide, and one of the most definitive tools is a firearm, which results in 90% completion of suicide attempt. Although I do not in any way question the intentions of Councilman Volke, I just want to make sure that we're not limiting the scope. Thank you.
Good evening, Dale Walter, 876 Claffey Avenue, Gambrels, Maryland. Hadn't really thought about testifying on this, but after hearing testimony and things, I'm going to throw out a year, 2018. I'm going to throw out the number 7 and 156. What I'm talking about is correctional officer deaths. 7 is the line of duty deaths of a correctional officer in the United States. 156. 156 are the numbers of suicides that we can directly attribute as part of the job. what we find is that, and that's just, why did they kill themselves? And that's them leaving the note saying, I've done it because of the job. It's not because of other underlying factors, such as, people going through a divorce. Well, why are they going through a divorce? Because of the job. Part of the issue that we have just within this profession and public safety, I'm going to say as a general whole, is that there's a stigma. If one reaches out to get help, they're considered weak. Well, I was brought up that sometimes reaching out and asking for help is a sign of strength. I applaud this effort, and I'm grateful for it. I'd like to see this council do things in regards to PTSD within our public safety profession. Hopefully, there's some things in the works on the state side that hopefully that the county can get behind. But PTSD in public safety is real, and it is truly a health crisis. It's not just a gun issue. We've had at least 6 officers that I've worked with have taken their own life. Not all were with a firearm. I've also been, present for inmate deaths, in custody deaths, suicide. I've been there when the family, as a young man, hung on for 4 days with their family standing by when that young man parted this world.
Thank you, sir.
There. So, thank you.
Thank you. The public hearing on resolution number 220 is now closed. I'd like to ask the administration to come back to the table. At this time, we have an opportunity for any further discussion from the council.
Madam Chairman, shall I read it in to move on to the vote?
Yes, you should definitely correct me when I've failed to do my duty.
It was just a suggestion. Resolution 220, resolution declaring suicide a public health crisis in Anne Arundel County and requesting the Department of Health take immediate steps to identify residents affected by mental illness and offer adequate treatment and services to those affected and at risk of death by suicide.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everybody who came out this evening to speak on this resolution. As Delegate Bagnall referenced, I did write a pretty extensive op-ed that gave a good deal of my thinking on this resolution and how it's affected me and where it comes from, and I put that in the Capitol last week, so I appreciate them running that. I did get a chance to listen to the work session, as I noted earlier, and I got a chance to hear the comments from some of my colleagues. I know that my council colleague, vice chair, from District 1, Ms. Lacey, and I discussed the term identify in this resolution as it was originally drafted, and that was unintentional in the sense that we're not expecting to run around and start calling people randomly and ask them how their mental health is at this point. That would be clearly an invasion of their privacy, their liberty, and that's not what we're trying to do. So we have worked together to be able to make some changes with that. I've worked with my colleague from District 5, Councilwoman Fiedler, on expanding this beyond just the gun component and the firearm component of this to capture the other mechanisms through which death by suicide can be accomplished, because they are a huge part of this as well. I've heard what Dr. Kay had to say about the attempt data and the fact that many people attempt death by suicide and that they need to be counted here too. So we have an amendment that I believe will fix a lot of these issues. But one of the things that I keep coming back to with this resolution is that words matter, because one of my colleagues said that at the work session, words matter, and I agree with that. And there was some discussion of whether this is a crisis or an issue or a problem or what we call it, and there was some discussion of how this related to opioids, and I just wanted to share a couple things that I noted from that, because that's one of the most high-profile situations where we've called something a crisis recently in this county. So the health officer shared some statistics at the work session indicating how the opioid statistics went up and down from 2011 to 2017. 2011, we had 128 deaths from opioids. There were 141 in 2012, down to 127 in 2013, up to 149, down to 145 in 2015, up to 211, 216 in 2017. If you look at the overall increase from 2011 to 2017, you saw a 68.75% increase in the number of deaths from opioid. We found that to be a crisis. In 2011, we had 49 deaths from suicide. In 2017, we had 95. That's a 93.88% increase in the number of deaths by suicide. To me, that's a crisis. I can't look at it any other way. I am not going to sit back and say, this is just a public health issue. We should just put this on the burner of a public health issue. It's not a public health issue. To anyone who's lost someone from suicide, this is a crisis. So with that, I would ask all of my colleagues to support the amended version of this resolution when the appropriate time comes. Thank you.
We did have an extensive conversation at the work session, and our health officer did share with us both then and today in an email with some of the public health definitions. I wanted to ask for your thoughts for the folks that didn't get the email in the audience.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. I do agree that we do have a public health concern here, Councilman Boki. And to the point of the data, this is something that we have been talking about in this county and this state for years now. In fact, a few years ago, we had a Trends in Youth Suicide report that we put out. This was in 2018, and some follow-up work last year. Excuse me. To look at what we're doing throughout our county, throughout our system, both in the schools and also outside of the schools. And as part of that, it means looking at what it is that we are talking about here. I thank the folks who came up to speak just a few minutes prior to me about the impact this has had on them. This is what we are talking about. We are talking about the impact on families and communities. And the data really, what it's meant to do is to provide a fuller picture of the experiences that people are having in our communities. It's not a substitute for that. And so as part of this effort, you noted that words matter, and I agree with that. I agree wholeheartedly with that. One of the things that we as a health department and in public health broadly try to do is make sure that as we increase awareness and the intensity of efforts, we're also trying to accurately convey what's going on using terminology that's agreed upon in the public health field. When we talk about a public health, and I'm going to go through a few terms just to make sure everybody is on the same page. When we talk about a public health emergency, that's a federal or a state designation that is accompanied by typically a release of funds and a very short duration, 30 to 90 days, depending. It's a very specific designation. Our county cannot make that kind of designation. When we talk about a public health crisis, it's typically attached to either a new public health issue with significant impact, often in the context of a natural disaster or new infection. Zika virus is probably or Ebola are probably the two most common ones that we think about. A significant worsening of an existing problem, the opioid crisis, as you mentioned, or an existing problem with a significant health impact that's not being addressed as a public health issue. What is a public health issue? It's a health concern over a wide range of the population that's amenable to a broad range of interventions. I'm sharing with you the definitions we use in public health. We use that terminology because it's recognized not just at the county health department level, but at state health departments and at the federal level, at the CDC. There are grant fundings and designations attached to that. One of the challenges we have is that words that we use in public, in common parlance, have different connotations in a technical sense. We might talk about our friend being depressed. We might talk about them being sad. But we would never use that in a technical sense. We would talk about somebody with depression. I know it's a subtle difference, but it's one that allows us to have a common language so that we can be clear about what we're talking about. I think we're all concerned, is to say the very least, about this issue. We're all aware of it. As you note, this is something that was highlighted. We, the health department, brought this data to the forefront as part of the gun violence task force, precisely because it is concerning, precisely because it is troubling. We have Andrew Michael here from the Mental Health Agency, have been working on this issue for decades. This is a public health issue. We have an agency dedicated to this. I don't think that we want to in any way impede the effort of the council to highlight this issue and to devote more resources to this. We need that. We need the attention on this. We've talked about other opportunities in prior sessions and in prior reports where we weren't able to get traction. So I'm hoping that each of you can help with getting greater traction on some of the efforts we want to put into place in the community. So that's what I have to share about this issue in terms of terminology and words and what they mean. I can leave it up to you as to what words you choose, but just recognize that we are operating under definitions that go far beyond what our county decides, but that take place at the state and the federal level.
Thank you. Did anyone else in the administration care to weigh in on the topic?
Madam Chair.
Oh, excuse me. I have
Thank you.
council members. Ms. Lacey?
Oh, sorry, Ms. Lacey.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Volke, for the courage and leadership that you've shown in bringing this topic up for public discussion. Even though it terrified me at first, in part because I would have liked to have spoken about it with you before you put it out there in the public so I could prepare myself. And the reason I say that is because I also suffer from depression and from other mental health diagnoses that I'm not going to name right here, but the point is I went many, many years struggling with depression and mental illness before I saw any help, before I believed I could be helped or that help was worthwhile from any kind of professional. I had more than one occasion during those years that I was contemplating suicide, and I happen to be, my version of being lucky is that I will contemplate something pretty much forever. So, if one could take one's own life by just sitting in one spot and never moving, and if I could sustain that for forever, that's probably what would have happened. Thankfully, I've had to, get up and move and do things to take care of my body, which still wants to be here as much as my mind frequently does not. And so that's the reason I wish we could have spoken about it earlier, because I need that content warning. I need it before we start talking about it, because it's important that someone in my position who, it's very awkward to be a person, a woman, a mother of 4 children, a wife to my husband of almost 18 years, a daughter, a sister, an aunt. I am all those things, and yes, I struggle against the desire to take my own life, because when I am in that place, it makes the most sense compared to any other thing that I could think of or anything anyone could tell me. The only thing that has pulled me out of that place, I should say things, ultimately has been medication and therapy from both a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Oh, it takes a whole lot to get me back to working. laughing at myself. But I'll tell you what has never made me feel better is stigma. Feeling like I will be stigmatized if someone knows how broken I am. Judgment has certainly never helped me and has tended to push me toward feeling like I would be right to do what I think I need to do. And in that judgment, I think specifically we've heard from, from moms. Moms, we get it every which way from Sunday, and one of the worst is how selfish you would be. And unless you've been there, I can tell you that you do not understand. And what I hope will be something that tangible that comes out of this conversation is that we all seek to understand and that we have compassion and show compassion for each other. And that when we ask, when we say, how are you, that we understand that maybe the person you just asked can't answer that question well at all that day. They can't tell you the truth because the truth is too painful for them to even say out loud or acknowledge. Not to mention the fact that you ask them, and if they're going to try to tell you, they worry that you will reject them. And that rejection will just reaffirm the negative cycle that they're in. It is very, very hard. And I'm grateful to still be here, but I had to learn some things I needed to do to keep myself from taking my own life. One of which is that I'll never have a firearm in my household because it's too damn lethal. And I wouldn't be able to take it back. But I think having, as much as I wouldn't otherwise have chosen to have this conversation today, but for this resolution. So here we are, and I really just wanted to say that everyone who came up to speak about your experiences, I was very touched and moved, and I think you're all very brave and courageous, and thank you for doing that.
Mr. Volk. Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I was going to say is literally inconsequential next to that, but I just wanted to make the point to my colleagues that I appreciate everything Dr. Kay said about the terms that are used in the public health world and issue versus crisis and what those different things mean, but I think at the end of the day, we're a body that makes policy. We're a body that makes statements. We have an opportunity with this to make a statement. I think this is something on which we should make a very loud and very clear statement that we are going to step into this space and we are going to call this what it is, which is a crisis, and we are going to speak truth to this, and we are going to confront this as a county. And I think that that's what the value of this resolution and calling it a crisis is. So I would just leave my colleagues with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Rodvian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to just repeat what has already been said to thank the speakers for sharing their stories. I know that one of the biggest challenges for people facing mental illness is the stigma that comes with it. And I think over the past few decades, things have improved somewhat. We're still not at a place, but I can't even imagine just looking around the room and seeing the number of people nodding. And I imagine that a very large number of the people sitting in this room can relate to the experiences that have been raised. Hopefully, very few have relate to the experience of losing a child, because I think that is about the most devastating that you could possibly imagine, and that's a pain that I wouldn't wish on anyone. I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But I think when we talk about suicide, we need to make sure that we're remembering suicide doesn't happen in isolation. Suicide is the ultimate result of mental illness, of untreated, unmended mental illness. And so I hope we can broaden this. I'm happy to support this resolution, but I hope we broaden the conversation to talk not only about suicide, but to talk about mental health and mental well-being and the ways that we can improve it when it comes time for us to have conversations about our budget in the county, that we are willing to put forth not just forth the statement, but also the resources that will ultimately be needed to tackle what I also believe is a very serious issue. I won't use a specific terminology because I realize, there are terms of art, but my day job is a public school teacher, and I've seen it increase in young people I've been teaching about a decade, and it has gotten worse. There are lots of different things that have made that an issue. This is something that's really important to me, and I'm going to continue to advocate for it beyond just supporting this resolution. When it comes time, to look at our budget, when we talk about resources for young people, resources for the health department in the community, resources to support our first responders, they can suffer a very, very heavy burden, because oftentimes they're the first one at the scene to meet family, to find the deceased person. This is an issue that touches my family very personally, and this past summer, a very close family member of mine lost someone who was very close to them, who I also knew, but I consider myself more the secondary victim to suicide by gun, by firearm. And it's been a struggle for that family member to make sense of things, because it's not something you can make sense of. So, like I said, I'm happy to support this resolution. I think it's an important, I think it absolutely deserves conversation, but we need to broaden the conversation and talk about mental health more generally. This is not unrelated to the addiction crisis. I've talked with our health department director, and the word I believe is comorbidity between addiction and mental illness. So these things are closely tied together, and I hope that we can I hope this is a starting point where we can look at all of these pieces together, and we can look at how firearms, as Councilwoman Lacey mentioned, are a very lethal, and unfortunately, as my family member experienced this summer, very effective, if effective is the right word there, lethal, in terms of means for committing suicide. And so I hope we can use this as a starting point and broaden our conversation, and I will be supporting this resolution.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've talked a lot about the definitions and the terminology, and I know that we have, perhaps because I'm not from the medical profession, a difference of opinion on that terminology. During the work session, we heard from the police department that mental health and folks being taken to the hospital is crushing the department. And we know that our hospitals are trying to keep up with the population that's entering the emergency department. Our schools are sending 5-year-olds to the hospital. So I just want to make sure that we aren't minimizing by terminology the fact that families aren't crisis, people aren't crisis. And when it's to this point, it is a crisis, in my opinion. And I know Ms. Anderson did not get to finish her statements, but I do want to just summarize an area that I think is important. She went on to say in her statement that they struggled to get access and specifically family therapy to support Noah. They eventually got off the wait list, and they had one session. It was on a Thursday. He was gone on Saturday.
Thank you. I know we have 2 amendments to this bill. Are we ready to move on to that part of this discussion? Okay. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1. This amendment rewrites the resolution to shift the focus to suicide as a public health crisis in the county.
Do I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Would the administration like to comment? Wait,
Wait.
hold on. I'm supposed to ask for discussion. I never do this right.
Ask the sponsor if they want to say.
Sponsor, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, this is a hard topic. This amendment is introduced after discussions with members of the community who have been affected directly by a death by suicide and discussions with our health officer. It does broaden the scope and captures complex factors and urges insured resources. And I think it's important to note, and thanks to technology, I am able to reference Ms. Anderson's testimony, but not all acts of suicide are firearms. Noah's was not. And there are many other methods that can be used. And this amendment also calls for a reduction in the stigma that is surrounding mental health and the hope that we can support our first responders and the professionals that we partner with in the community.
Do we have any discussion?
Ms. Fiedler, I believe we wanted to put on the record that in the...
My apologies.
No. Opening language of the resolution, in line 1 down through offer in line 4, we were going to change to line 3.
Yes, that's correct, Madam Secretary.
Okay, so that's on the record now.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Would the administration like to speak to this amendment?
The administration supports this amendment. I've sat here and listened to everybody, and it's incredibly hard tonight, and I want to thank the sponsor for bringing the discussion forward. I want to thank the makers of the amendment for communicating with the administration and with our health department to get the words right. I think this is touched everybody here, and it is. I spoke to the county executive before I came down here tonight, and he told me something, and I want to quote him and what he said, which is, from his perspective, the issue of crisis versus emergency versus issue, it doesn't really matter what we care about it. What we have to do is do something about it. And that's why the administration is deferring to our health professionals about what and how we should characterize this. But the semantic debate about the word is nothing. It's what we have to do after this resolution passes. When we get the budget, when we have a friend in need, when our health department needs more, that's what we need to do. So with that, we support it, and happy to turn it over if anybody has anything else.
Yes. Excuse me, I just wanted to thank you for the language that's broadening this to capture the range of experiences that people are having in the community around attempts, and we talk about those who pass, but there are also those who survive, and the families who are impacted. Those individuals and families who are impacted. So I thank you. I thank you for this amendment.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And I appreciate you working with me on this amendment because you are a medical professional and know the language that is appropriate and the data. So thank you for helping craft this.
Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll on amendment number 1?
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you please read amendment number 2?
Amendment number 2. This amendment changes the term public health crisis to urgent public health issue.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is this the time to talk?
Yes.
This has been a very, very, very difficult conversation, and through the work session, through the personal experiences, through the testimony, one of the things that when this original resolution surfaced, it was very clear to me that I am not a public health official, and when we take office, we don't automatically become experts in all topics, even though sometimes we think we are. So I have really turned to our health officer for advice, and I know that there's been a lot of conversation over the last 2 weeks. And again, I echo the sentiments of Mr. Barron and the county executive. We can argue semantics, but we know that we have issues in the community, and they're very, 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 very emotional and run deep. But at the end of the day, this amendment is here because our health officer has concluded that the way we talk about this is different than what is currently in the resolution. So it might pass, it might not, but the words are here, and I'll leave it at that. Do y'all have any? Would you like to respond?
Appreciate the maker of the amendment bringing it forward. The administration supports, not to repeat what I said before, making this resolution match the scientific health language does not change in any way the layman's understanding of the intent of those words. The sponsor and of the resolution, everybody in front of me, and I'm sure everybody at the table with me and everybody behind me all agrees that we need to do something.
Ms. Lacy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to argue, and I very much respect the expertise that Dr. Kay brings and your opinion. I respect it. But I will offer the perspective that I have based on my struggles. And even though one of my other hats is lawyer, overriding that hat, I prefer crisis, because I think in this document, which is a resolution from the council stating, expressing public policy, it's written for the public of Anne Arundel County, anyone should be able to read it and understand that the issue from a technical standpoint is more than that. And even the phrase urgent public health issue doesn't get you to the level of urgency and importance and the need for immediate action that crisis does. And I know some people say the word crisis is overused, but I think it's just regrettable that we just have so many things around that are crises. And if we actually would just recognize that there are many crises to be dealt with, crisis is an accurate term, that will actually, using that, helps to create space for us to have this kind of discussion that we've had, to share things with others that are very difficult to share and yet necessary for health and ultimately are life-giving. And so I regret that I can't support this amendment, but I understand why others will.
Madam Secretary, I see no other comments. Will you please call the roll on amendment number 2?
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Nay.
Ms. Lacy?
Nay.
Mr. Volkey?
Nay.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Nay.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
2 in the affirmative, 5 in the negative. Amendment number 2 is defeated.
Those were the 2 amendments for that resolution.
Call the vote.
Oh, now we can vote on this. Yeah. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Resolution 220.
As amended.
As amended.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 220, as amended, is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to take a 5-minute recess before we come back to our next bill. How do I do that?
So moved. So moved.
Make a motion to recess, and you can do a verbal.
I'd like to make a motion to recess for 5 minutes.
So moved. Second. Yeah.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The council will be back in 5 minutes. The County Council is now back in session. Madam Secretary?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I just wanted to correct for the record. Amendment number 2, I may have read it out loud wrong. It was 3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. The amendment is still defeated.
Thank you. We do have a lengthy agenda, so we are going to move along. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9719.
Bill number 9719, an ordinance concerning zoning housing for the elderly of moderate means.
Thank you. This is co-sponsored by myself, Ms. Lacy, Ms. Rodvian, and Mr. Pruski. I'm happy to take the lead on this discussion, if that's all right with my colleagues. Okay. Bill 9719, it refers to a affordable housing category, elderly with moderate means. We have taken up this conversation this past summer with a workforce housing bill, and the goal was to reduce barriers to affordable housing. This bill essentially, in its most simple tasks, takes the category of elderly with moderate means from special exception to conditional use. The bill does outline, let me back up. The category of housing for elderly with moderate means already currently exists in the code, and it does allow for a density bump in each of the different housing categories. However, it is a special exception, which adds a timetable issue to housing with tax credits that have a window of time to get up and built. We have taken this concept very seriously, and this bill does allow for a density increase, but this bill calls for what we're calling super conditions in R2 and R5 to include a maximum number of dwelling units, a maximum coverage of structures and parking. The site shall be in priority funding areas, and the projects must be on a minor arterial or higher classification road. It's important to note that in Anne Arundel County, we have currently 834 individuals 62 or over waiting for affordable housing. We currently have only 388 that are designated 62 and older, a total of 587 units of elderly housing. And we also house folks 62 and over can take part in our Housing Choice program. But the overall intention is to remove barriers to construction of affordable housing. As we all know, we are facing a housing crisis. With that, it's a little difficult to run a debate and chair a meeting, so let me make sure I do this right. I have any other questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, I'll ask for the administration to weigh in, please.
Sure. With me at the table is Ms. Rhodes from OPZ, Ms. Koch from ACDS, and Ms. Blair Klausmeyer from Law. 9719, as the sponsor noted, is designed to address a great need that we have in the county. I'll let Ms. Koch from ACDS talk a little bit more about the numbers. The sponsor referenced a couple of sort of sobering statistics. But I think that actually understates the problem of senior housing and affordability. I'll let Ms. Koch speak a little bit more on those numbers, but we all know that we're facing a demographic wave that's going to hit this county. Some are calling it a silver tsunami, whatever you want to call it. People are aging, and we don't have enough housing. A number of folks are going to be, as they retire, find their income constrained, and that is going to make housing also difficult. We understand there are some amendments coming. Appreciate the sponsors working with the administration to tighten this bill up a little bit. Look forward to discussing those at the appropriate time. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to somebody a little smarter than me on housing issues. Ms. Koch.
Okay, thank you. Just to state that 9719 really does add an incentive for developers to build new units that are affordable to the elderly population. And just to add to the chairman's numbers that she's given you already, in a recent study completed by Real Property Research Group, they found that there are only 8,680 affordable units to the more than 17,600 renter households earning less than $50,000 or below in our county. What this means that at best, currently, we already have a 50% shortfall. And many of our elderly are may have an income of below $50,000. In fact, their average income is $46,000 to $47,000. As many as you know, the elderly population in our county continues to grow. In fact, the Maryland Department of Aging predicts there will be a 40% increase in our elderly living in the county from 2017 to 2030. So we encourage you to support Bill 9719, especially with the amendments coming forward from the administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from my colleagues? No. We'll now open the public hearing. on Bill 9719. I have no idea if I have anybody signed up. Yes. We do have two individuals currently signed up, Ms. Nancy Roos and Ms. Amy Leahy. Please come forward. You have, state your name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes. Ms. Roos?
Actually, it's Race.
I'm so
Nancy
sorry.
Race. My writing is terrible.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I will correct it on my page.
Nancy Race, 27 Acorn Drive, Annapolis. I'm here representing the Anne Arundel Affordable Housing Coalition, which is an organization of roughly 75 individuals and organizations involved in all aspects of affordable housing. The coalition supports this bill. We think it's a good thing for the county to be doing. We do have some comments and some suggestions. One thing I noted is that the definition of elderly provided in the bill does not conform with any of the 3 criteria that the Federal Fair Housing Act allows to sort of allow just senior housing, and so I would strongly encourage amending that definition to conform to the Federal Fair Housing rules. I can discuss those, but not in my 2 minutes. And we think that the income level of 80% of median is an appropriate level, but would strongly encourage requiring a set-aside of a percentage of the units be available to serve households at 60% or less of median income, because that is where the greatest need is among the senior population. A set-aside of 60% of the units would be terrific. I would say at a minimum it should not be less than 40% to conform with the federal low-income housing tax credit set-aside requirement. We also think that it's important to, with the amendment of the existing bill, it took out requirements for monitoring and oversight, and we would encourage that those be put back into the bill so that the units can be monitored for compliance for the long haul with income requirements, as well as any other requirements that might be imposed by the documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Leahy?
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman Pickard and members of the County Council. My name is Amy Leahy, and I speak tonight as the Vice President for Public Affairs for the Greater Severna Park Council. We at GSPC have several concerns about the Bill 9719, and I've been authorized to ask that you vote against rather than vote for the bill as it is. And I understand there have been amendments that have been put in that address a couple of our concerns. One of our concerns is that only one resident in each unit must be 62 years or older. We believe that both occupants should be at that minimum age for senior citizen of 62. Our second concern is that rescinding the requirement that the project be approved by special exception, making it a conditional use in R2 and R5 removes a step of required public notification. So that's a concern for us also. Another is that rescinding the requirements for the county and state loans for partial financing. Our concern is that there might be an opportunity for developers to not maybe have to follow the strict guidelines that are set in place by the county and the state. Severna Park priority funding area is along Ritchie Highway, and currently there's no land that's available right there. It's already shopping centers along the way, and the only other land that's available in that priority funding area is in environmentally sensitive Cattail Creek area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who did not sign up who wishes to speak at this time? Please state your name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Good evening. David Katz, 1931 Pendence Drive. I just want to speak briefly in support of the bill and if it were to be amended, speak in support of the amendments. I just want to say that I think that this bill is effectively a corrective bill. the council worked very hard and the administration worked very hard on the workforce housing legislation that passed this past summer, and this bill brings housing for the elderly of moderate means on par with the workforce bill. There's no reason that people 62 and above should be treated any differently than non-age restricted workforce housing. So I think that the most important thing about this bill is it brings it to an equal playing field as the workforce legislation and effectively corrects the current housing for the elderly of moderate means. In addition, I think it's correct to remove the special exception process in this bill. The purpose of a special exception is for the applicant to demonstrate need and compatibility. I think we've heard tons of testimony in the past as to need, and we consistently hear statistics as to the need. In terms of compatibility, well, with the rigid standards in the conditional uses that will exist with this bill, you've effectively shown compatibility. So requiring an 8-month special exception process that only lengthens the time and further challenges the ability to put tax credits to use and put these needed units online is unnecessary. So I applaud the efforts of this bill and speak in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. The public hearing on Bill number 97 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9719.
Bill number 9719, an ordinance concerning zoning housing for the elderly of moderate means.
Is there any further discussion from my colleagues? There are 4 amendments being brought forward tonight. Would the administration, Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1. This amendment requires that all housing for the elderly of moderate means shall consist only of rental dwelling units.
May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion? Would the admin like to speak on that?
Please support this amendment.
Do we have any discussion? Madam Secretary.
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just had a quick question on the amendment. I just am not clear on why. I guess that would just be my question. And it's not necessarily for the makers of the amendment. If anybody can just tell me, why is it that they have to consist of rental dwelling units? Is that some requirement somewhere, or I'm just curious?
For the record, Kathy Koch. The reason why we're recommending that it be focused on rental need is because that's where the need is. Okay. There's a great need to produce units that are affordable for elderly. For rental units, there's not a need necessarily to produce more units for home ownership for elderly.
Okay. And just so I'm clear, if we didn't put this into the bill, they could still be rental units.
But they could also be home ownership
They
units?
could be home ownership.
Yes.
So they could be either one.
Yes.
This is going to
When the line was removed that a federal or state, if it was federal or state funds previously, the only funds available for projects from the feds or from the state or the county is for rental projects.
Gotcha.
So it really limited it. By removing that line and then putting this in, you've clarified that that's what you're doing.
So you're basically putting it back where it was before.
For rental units.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacey?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Please read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2. This amendment adds a requirement that the property be encumbered by a deed restriction that requires, 1, units be occupied by individuals 62 years of age or older. 2, at least 60% of the units be occupied by individuals with an income that does not exceed 60% of the median income adjusted for household household size according to the Baltimore primary metropolitan statistical area, and 3, the remaining units be occupied by individuals with an income that does not exceed 80% of the median income adjusted for household size according to the Baltimore primary metropolitan statistical area.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Would the administration like to discuss this?
The administration asks the council to move this amendment. Just in layman's terms, this amendment prevents a switcheroo. So if you build it as a seniors of moderate or an elderly of moderate means, it has to stay one.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the switcheroo prevention. I've been talking to the Office of Planning and Zoning about that for some other things, too. I guess my other question would be on the requirements of the thresholds. Again, is that something that was previously required by the federal and the state monies that you're adding back in?
Yes, in fact, it was probably even higher with the federal, and
Okay.
then this restricts it back again.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 2 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 3.
Amendment number 3, this amendment adds a requirement that the developer establish the maximum rental rates allowable for the rental units and that the rates be confirmed by the county or its designee as appropriate.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Would the administration like to elaborate?
Again, appreciate working with the sponsor to come up with another tightening amendment. Believe it's pretty self-explanatory.
Any questions from my colleagues? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 3.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Nay.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
5 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Amendment number 3 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 4.
Amendment number 4, this amendment adds a requirement that the deed restrictions be enforceable by the county or its designee.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Would the administration like to elaborate?
Again, appreciate working with the sponsor of the bill. Again, this is just another tightening amendment to ensure that these properties remain for their stated use.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think this is a question for Office of Law, but I'm just guessing or asking, I suppose, is this, wouldn't it always be enforced by the county if we're the ones putting on the restriction in the first place? Do we need the language?
We do need the language
Okay.
because deed restrictions are generally privately
Right, but the
enforceable.
deed restriction in this case is
It's required
from
by
the county,
county
right.
law. So
Okay.
this just clarifies that it's not just a private
okay.
restriction.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 4.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative. Amendment number 4 is adopted.
Thank you. Bill number 9719 as amended will be heard on Monday night, February 3rd, 2020, if I am not mistaken. We will move on to Bill number 8819. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8819.
Bill number 8819, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and budget, use or occupancy tax, transient lodging, short-term rentals.
Ms. Rodvian.
We've discussed this bill previously. This is one of two bills that will address short-term rentals, sometimes known as Airbnbs in the county, in terms of just putting some simple registration and making sure that we are reaping the revenue benefits of these operations.
Would the administration like to respond?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Joining me at the table is Ms. Blair Klausmeyer from Law, Mr. Beecham from Budget, Ms. Good and Ms. McQuaid from Finance, and Ms. Rhodes from Planning and Zoning. We have discussed this bill before. I think it's important to note that the broker companies, the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, are providing a service, and we have had conversations with some of the entities. They're comfortable in collecting and remitting this revenue. As a reminder, the revenue that would come in on this by state law, 20% of it goes to two categories: the visitor center and the arts, 17% and 3% respectively. If the short-term rental unit is in the city of Annapolis, the city of Annapolis would see that revenue. But these short-term rentals are all over the county. They are not. It is not just an Annapolis issue, and this is happening. When you rent a hotel room, you pay this. You should pay it if you're using a short-term rental. So with that, we appreciate the sponsors working with the administration to address some of the concerns that the administration raised previously. We will comment on those amendments as they come, but appreciate everybody's hard work on that process. So with that, we generally support the bill pending the outcome of the amendments that we'll be talking about shortly.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion from my colleagues? The public hearing was closed. Previously, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8819.
I read it in for vote. We're now ready to start reading amendments.
Goodness, okay, fine.
It's okay.
We do have 7 amendments, so now I go to amendment mode. Okay, Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1. This amendment exempts short-term residential rentals from the requirement that the records be made available at all times during normal business hours for inspection and examination by the controller, the collecting authority, or their agents.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just thought I'd give a little description of what this is about.
Sure.
So short-term rentals will fall under the same category as hotels and bed and breakfasts, which are currently required to have their records available for inspection for county-related purposes. And this would basically exempt them from having to, sort of allow someone to come in to inspect those records because, they would likely be kept in a private home or a home office, or because of the nature of the space, we wanted to create something a little less invasive.
Does the administration have a response?
Administration supports removing a burdensome government regulation.
Okay. I see no discussion from my colleagues. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2. This amendment defines hosting platform within the definition of remarketer.
Is there a motion to adopt?
They're buried in my bag.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Rodvian?
So basically, this just adds a definition for hosting platform, which is a critical element of this whole type of operation.
Does the administration like to weigh in?
We support.
Any further discussion? No? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 2 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 3.
Amendment number 3, this amendment changes the term fee to rent to be consistent with the terms used elsewhere.
Motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So, Ms. Rodvian?
So this is really just to create consistency of terminology throughout the code.
Does the administration want to weigh in?
Administration supports.
Great. Have any questions of my colleagues? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 3.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 3 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 4.
Amendment number 4, this amendment provides a short-term residential rental is one that is facilitated by a hosting platform.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Rodvian?
So the purpose of this amendment was to really be realistic about what we will be able to monitor as a county if a short-term rental is not facilitated on a hosting platform. It's really going to be out of the scope of what the county would be able to actually monitor, and so we wanted to make sure that reality matched with what our capability would be in this case. So that's really the purpose of this.
Would the administration like to weigh in on this amendment?
The administration supports and agrees.
Seeing no comments from my colleagues, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 4.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 4 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 5.
Amendment number 5, this amendment clarifies that the occupancy tax levied under this section is the hotel tax as referred to in section 2603 of the local government article of the state code.
Is there a motion to
So
adopt? Second?
Second.
Ms. Rodvian, would you like to discuss?
Yes, this basically is an amendment to make sure that the language used in our code matches with language used in the state code governing this topic.
Mr. Barron, would the administration like to weigh in?
The administration supports, as I noted in my opening remarks this evening, the hotel tax is governed by state law. This, I think, clarifies and makes it clear what we're talking about in the bill.
Do I have any comments from my colleagues? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 5.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Nay.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
5 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, 1 absent. Amendment number 5 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 6.
Amendment number 6. This amendment requires a remarketer to remit the tax on the next rent for a short-term residential rental directly to the collecting authority and requires the host to remit the tax if the remarketer fails to do so.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Rodvian?
This basically will require or facilitate agreements between the county and the various platforms so that the platforms will collect any tax or fee and then remit it to the county instead of remitting it to the owner and then to the county. So basically it just cuts out a step in the transaction and streamlines the process for the property owners.
Would the administration like to weigh in?
Administration agrees, appreciates the work of folks who are involved in this discussion. It's important I think this is an important clarification and make sure that the property owner who is doing it isn't overburdened and unintentionally gets themselves in trouble. And additionally, most of the big platforms are fine doing this. They do this in many, many, many other jurisdictions.
Ms. Hare, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So my only question on this one is, if the Airbnb platform fails to remit the tax to the county, it says in here that the host has to do it. So if the host hasn't been collecting it because Airbnb's been collecting it, but for some reason Airbnb doesn't remit it, we're asking the host to kick it in, even though they never collected the tax? Is that accurate?
That's what it says.
Okay.
I believe so.
Can you state that more clearly?
Yes.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion from my colleagues, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 6.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Nay.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Nay.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
4 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, 1 absent. Amendment number 6 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 7.
Amendment number 7, this amendment requires an owner or operator to submit a fully completed tax return to the collecting authority each month, regardless of whether the tax is collected, and gives the controller discretion to allow an owner or operator of a short-term residential rental to submit quarterly returns.
Thank you. Motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Rodvian, this is your amendment.
I think the description that our administrator gave is actually pretty self-explanatory. So if there's any additional questions, I'm happy to chime in. But basically, this was to make sure that record keeping was ongoing in cases where a property owner maybe went several months without, they might be allowed to submit on a less frequent basis. Again, trying to streamline the process for property owners.
Do you have any questions from my colleagues? The administration like to weigh in?
Administration supports.
Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 7.
Ms. Rodvian?
Before I vote, I just want to say thank you to the administration and all the different folks on the team that worked on this. This is really a collaborative effort. We took feedback that we got from constituents and people that operate in this arena and tried to make a law that would work for everyone. So I really appreciate all the time and effort and energy put by everyone that put together these amendments. And with that, I will say aye to amendment number 7.
Ms. Hare?
Nay.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Nay.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
4 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, 1 absent. Amendment number 7 is adopted.
Bill number 8819, as amended, will be heard on Monday, February 3rd, 2020. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 8919.
Bill 8919, an ordinance concerning licenses and registrations, zoning, short-term residential rentals.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, but before we go a little further, as personal privilege, would you allow us just a moment to pray, if we like, to ourselves? I know that Ms. Fiedler is having a family emergency right now. She's not going to be coming back to this meeting, but it's very serious, and I just would appreciate a minute if we could just reflect for her. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where are we again? Did you read the title already? I'm sorry. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8919.
Bill number 8919, an ordinance concerning licenses and registrations, zoning, short-term residential rentals.
Okay. Ms. Rodvian, this is your bill?
Yeah, so this is the second of the two bills related to short-term rentals, AKA Airbnbs. And this is just creating a process by which property owners who are operating these Airbnbs, these short-term rentals, will register with the county. And again, intended to create as streamlined a process as possible.
Would the administration like to weigh in on this bill this time?
Sure. Joining me at the table is the second half of Team Airbnb, Mr. Africa from IMP, Ms. Rhodes from OPZ, and Ms. Blair Klausmeyer from Office of Law. We agree with the intent of the bill, appreciate the sponsor and all those who put effort into coming up with a few amendments to address the administration's concerns. We'll be talking about those shortly. Again, generally supportive of the bill. It's important to get it right.
Thank you. And with the public hearing closed, Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1, this technical amendment makes a grammatical correction.
Ms. Rodvian?
No need to comment further.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Unfortunately, Ms.
I messed up again.
No, can we, we're not sure if there was a motion on the...
I don't think there was.
So moved.
I have a motion to adopt.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, it's going to be a long night.
Okay, and I will call the roll. Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
This amendment changes the term fee to rent to be consistent with terms used elsewhere.
Madam Chair, if I may, point of order. Is it possible to bundle these amendments? We have a lot to go through tonight. If my colleagues don't want to do it, that's fine, but I'd like to make a motion to bundle amendments 2 through 9.
Second.
So a lot of these amendments are clarifications. As my colleague sitting to the left of me always states, that we like to have things clarified in the law, and as I look at these, we certainly can read through them, discuss them, but for the benefit of getting through, and there's some folks here from other community associations that have bills that, may be here till 11 o'clock at night, and I just don't want to do that. And I think if we can get through that for the expediency, but people disagree with my motion, that's fine, but I just wanted to, for the benefit of the council and the public, to see if we can get these forward.
So we have a motion.
Okay.
Moved and seconded. We do a roll call.
We don't have a move or a second on that. So we have a motion
Correct.
made to vote on amendments 2 through 9 together. We need a second?
Second.
All right.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on the motion to bundle amendments 2 through 9.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Nay.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
5 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, 1 absent. The motion to vote on amendments 2 through 9 together is adopted. And
Thank you for telling me that. Madam Secretary, please read amendments number 2 through 9.
Amendment number 2, this amendment changes the term fee to rent to be consistent with the terms used elsewhere. Amendment number 3, this amendment adds a definition of rent. Amendment number 4, this amendment provides that a short-term residential rental is one that is facilitated by a hosting platform. Amendment number 5, this amendment deletes the requirement that hosts provide their state sales tax and use registration number as a part of an application for registration of a short-term residential rental. Amendment number 6, this amendment requires a host to keep rental records relating to short-term residential rentals for 3 years and to make records available to the county upon a written request. Amendment number 7, this amendment requires the county to provide a written request to a hosting platform to make certain records available for inspection. Amendment number 8, this amendment requires a host to provide proof of insurance for a short-term residential rental. Amendment number 9, this amendment requires the host to certify under oath that a short-term residential rental property meets the minimum safety criteria set forth in the registration form.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And Ms. Rodvian, would you like to discuss?
I'm just happy to answer any questions that there might be about these. And again, thank the team from the administration and all the departments that worked on creating, these amendments.
Would the administration like to weigh in on these amendments?
Happy to answer any specific questions any council member may have. Echo the sponsors' thanks. I'll just point out one quick thing that we thought was important, and that was making sure that the short-term rental owner provided proof of insurance. These platforms, the market is helping govern a lot of it, but stuff happens, and I'm glad that requirement's in there.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just have one question on amendment number 9. The certification under oath that a rental property meets a minimum safety criteria set forth in the registration form. Do we know what that minimum criteria would be? What are we asking people to certify under oath?
I'll let Mr. Africa discuss.
We don't have a definitive list right now, but we are following, using the words of Mr. Barron, what the industry dictates. Like Airbnb has a list of minimum requirements that are required of the host to have in the property, such as carbon monoxide monitors, smoke alarms, fire extinguishers, and the like. So
with carbon monoxide detectors and things like that, these are generally things that people already have in their home. We're not asking them to install sprinkler systems the way
correct.
Commercial. Okay. And when you say certify under oath, is this something that they're just going to be signing the registration form and it's going to list it on there, or are they going to have to submit something separate, some additional sort of step?
Just to sign the form.
It will just be listed on there. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions of my colleagues? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendments 2 through 9.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacey?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 2 through 9 are adopted.
Bill number 8919, as amended, will be heard on Monday, February 3rd, 2020. The chair appreciates the bundling of amendments.
Anytime, Madam Chairwoman.
Ooh, that was going to be fun. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9219 as amended.
Bill number 9219, an ordinance concerning fair housing exceptions.
Ms. Hare and Mr. Volkey are sponsors. Did someone care to speak on this bill? Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First, I'd just like to thank all the conversations with my colleagues and the public surrounding sort of the challenge of making the county affordable for all of our residents and workforce. I think it's an important conversation that we're having. I will start actually by reading from a 2018 National Association of Counties Futures Lab report. Employees who live and work in different counties can have commutes requiring hours of driving that detract from time that an employee could spend with their families or attending to non-work-related responsibilities. The cumulative impact of this daily loss of time can create tensions distracting employees from their work. Employees may end up looking for work closer to their homes to alleviate these challenges. Furthermore, employees who actually live in the counties they serve have an easier time building relationships within the community, which in turn makes county employees better at their jobs. In addition, residents more readily trust the decisions made by county employees who live in their county and are active members of their community than those made by employees living outside the county. This is a topic that we've heard about, particularly with respect to some of our public service occupations, teachers, police, fire. We received a letter from the sheriff's office earlier this evening, actually, talking specifically about a number of deputies who reside outside the county and the burden that places on them. One tool to help alleviate that burden of the expense on our public service occupations or military, et cetera, is to allow sort of market rate landlords to offer incentives, a 10% discount to all military, for example. This is not a new concept. Our Office of Law has said that many jurisdictions across the nation have programs like this. And actually in Anne Arundel County, I believe we do have property tax credits for certain public safety occupations already. This is certainly not a global solution. It is sort of one small part that could be a contributing help to those people who provide an essential function to our country and our county, and where there has been talk that it is necessary. Without this law, without this bill today, Office of Law has said that incentives would violate the fair housing law. We have a veterans preference already in the fair housing law, so these categories are added here to allow those incentives to be a little bit more broadly applied. Thank you.
Have any questions from my colleagues? Would the administration like to weigh in?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joining me at the table is Ms. Blair Klausmeyer from Office of Law. We've discussed this bill several times. Just to reiterate, the administration is supportive of the goal. Concerns have been raised. Several concerns have been raised about a potential for discriminatory effect, and therefore the administration cannot support at this time, but looks forward to working with not only the sponsors of this bill, but the entire council on finding other ways to provide incentives.
One of the, I'm going to be very brief about this before we open it up to public hearing, but our fair housing law is about discrimination. We have other provisions in our code related to workforce and affordable housing. So this conversation has gone back and forth, and we tend to conflate the two. But do we have Mr. Pruski?
I just have one question for the administration. Again, we'll hear testimony from the public about the concerns, the benefits, but I want to make this absolutely clear. If this doesn't pass and somebody from the sheriff's office says, well, we're giving a discount from a realtor, are you going to go in the administration for the Human Relations Commission and state that we don't believe that that's the case? Or obviously, you know, that's not something you're going to go out and prosecute. You know, are we creating a problem here to something that's not a solution? I just want to be clear about where the admin stands, because if I think the way you said it before, when we're working on this original bill, once you get into who's in, who's out, then you're identifying people. And if you leave it out and you represent the Human Relations Commission in terms of the administration stance, you could say, well, we're not going to go after that. So could you clarify that, please?
Well, so first, the Human Relations Commission has now all been appointed, so they are set up as a commission in the county, so I don't want to speak directly for them. My understanding of how they are going to be looking at housing issues is by complaint. So I don't believe will be out there hunting for this.
Thank you.
Mr. Volke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Barron, thank you for that. And I agree, I don't think they're probably going to be hunting either. I think they've got other things to do. But in the event that you had an individual who was trying to rent or buy in a particular place, and they learned that their neighbor, who happened to be a police officer, was getting some sort of an incentive, and they felt aggrieved by that because they might sit there and say, that's not quite fair. I'm paying market rent over here, and this person's getting a significant cut. If they were to make that complaint to the Human Relations Commission, they'll have to investigate that. That's their purview, that's their job.
That is correct.
Right. And the issue that I think we're all kind of looking at this, and I understand Madam Chair's point that we want to be careful not to conflate these two issues, fair housing and affordable housing. However, on this, we're looking at a way of offering an affordable housing incentive that would not violate the fair housing law. That's what we're doing with this, because as we discussed at the last session of the council when we were here, there was a question as to whether or not these housing preferences would be violative, of the county's fair housing law. Ms. Blair Klausmeyer and her team did extensive research. They did a great memo for us, and it concludes it would. It's pretty obvious. I mean, I'm going to read one portion of it just because I think it's relevant to this discussion. Therefore, if a housing provider offered a preference based on occupation, the preference would be in violation of Maryland law. That's it. That's kind of the end of the analysis for us. So I understand the point that some of my colleagues are making, that let's not conflate issues. I understand the other point of let's recognize the limitations of who's going to be enforcing this or not, but let's also recognize that there's a legitimate basis that somebody could be aggrieved by this and could file a complaint, and we could wind up in this situation, and I don't think that's what any of us want. Did you want to add anything, Ms. Klaus?
I just want to say it's actually violative of county law.
County law,
County
yeah.
has county is the only one that has the preference. State law, of the protected class of occupation, state law and federal law do not. So we have created, and we're not the only one. There's other local jurisdictions that have that same protected class.
So maybe we need to amend that. But that's page 4 where it says Maryland law in there. It does say that. It's line 4. It says, therefore, if a housing provider offered a preference based on occupation, the preference would be in violation of Maryland law.
Oh,
I think that means
it should
to
say county law. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
Yes, it should
But
say
we all
county.
agree that it would be violated.
There is an issue, yes.
Yeah. All right. So I just wanted to frame up the argument in that way so that it's kind of clear that this isn't some attempt to throw a bunch of mud in the air and conflate issues and confuse people. This is actually a real problem that could really come up, and it would really be something that the Human Relations Commission would have well within their purview to investigate, and it'd be appropriate for them to investigate because that's the law that we've passed. So either the law has meaning and we enforce it and it stands for something, or it doesn't, and I don't think any of us want to go that route with it.
I think that's correct. I think the concerns that have been raised about a potential for a discriminatory effect matter.
Sorry, I've been distracted by the jackhammer that's happening.
Yeah,
Apologies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. They don't like the spill either. We will now open the public hearing on Bill 9219 as amended. I do have individuals signed up, so as I call your name, please come forward. And if I mispronounce your name, it's because of your handwriting. Patrick Fleehardy, Stephen Waddy, Jim Johnson, C.J. Mushaw, Barbara Samuels, and Dale Waldroff. As you come up, please, in the order that state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes. Mr. Flehardy?
Thank you. My name is Patrick Flehardy, and I live at 105 Victor Parkway, Annapolis. I'm here tonight to ask that you vote to defeat Bill 9219, which would amend the Fair Housing Act to allow persons to provide preferences in the sale, rental, or occupancy of housing to teachers, police officers, firefighters, and others. I have to admit that on the face of it, this bill appears to be a desirable and beneficial carve-out from the recently passed Fair Housing Act. And since my own son is a firefighter EMT in another jurisdiction, my first reaction was, yes, of course, this bill makes sense. Unfortunately, after doing a little research into its ultimate effects overall, I came to realize that such a carve-out for the specified occupations would end up actually undercutting the intent of the Fair Housing Act by perpetuating the county's legacy of discrimination and racism, because systemic racism has historically been baked into the hiring results of those professions. A simple statistical analysis will reveal that the membership of those populations does not come anywhere close to resembling the ethnic and racial makeup of our citizen community. It is crucial that we look at the impact any amendments may have on the intent of the original legislation. And I admit this is not easy stuff. I have lived my entire life benefiting from white privilege, and it is taking some hard work to view effects and impacts through the lens of racial justice. I am grateful to my brothers and sisters of the NAACP for helping me do that work. So I'm asking you to do the same thing. Before voting on 9219, I ask that each of you take the time to seriously consider the deeper consequences of an amendment that will end up serving to undercut the original intent of the Fair Housing Act and actually serve to perpetuate systemic discrimination and racism. Thank you.
Mr. Waddy?
Thank you. My name is Stephen Waddy. I'm here as the Political Action Chair on behalf of President Jacqueline Alsop and the Anne Arundel County branch of the NAACP. The NAACP urges a no vote on 9219 and any amendments to the bill. As we stated in our previous testimony on January 6, 2020, our analysis indicates that this bill would lead to a violation of the Fair Housing Act of 1968 by allowing facially neutral policy that would have a racially discriminatory effect. The cause of action regarding disparate impact was most recently recognized as legitimate by the United States Supreme Court in an opinion written by Republican Justice Kennedy before his retirement in 2017. It was written in 2015. Following the debate at the council hearing on January 6th, amendments were added that would still be discriminatory in those in the fields, because the numbers are so low in the other occupations. It would be like reinforcing the plantation mentality, rewarding someone for staying in their place, remaining in that position as a detention officer, remaining in that position where you have now baked in racially discriminatory hiring, or a recognition of race, which is the most interesting part of this, is that we have a racial recognition in some of these hiring categories, but not in others. Also, in regards to this bill, as it's written, public service occupations may include public and private hiring. And unfortunately, the council already voted down the opportunity to add government employees into the bill. And it would offer the private police officer to compete with a public police officer, and there will be no protections for the public police officer. If we add these exceptions into the bill, you would be exempting these public occupations if they're government occupations, if there is a private company that's competing and wants to offer the same.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Johnson?
Good afternoon. Jim Johnson, 11155 Dolefield Boulevard. This testimony today is offered on behalf of Maryland Multi-Housing Association. Our members offer housing to over 538,000 residents in the state of Maryland, and in Anne Arundel County alone, nearly 30,000 individual apartments. I also seat before you today as a retired 40-year law enforcement professional, 10 years as the Baltimore County Police Chief. I'm keenly aware of the negative impacts of housing affordability issues for county employees, first responder recruitment, retention, and most importantly for consideration, the effect of omnipresence, the value of omnipresence, police officer omnipresence seemingly being everywhere to our great communities. Our members have offered for quite some time discounts to the elderly, to students, to veterans, to military active. We've also offered to first responders, police and fire, teachers, medical care providers such as doctors and nurses. With the recent adoption of the Fair Housing Ordinance, it now prohibits our members from offering discounts to occupational groups that I've just mentioned. According to a 2019 study, a publication by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, a family needs to earn nearly $53,680 annually to afford a two-bedroom unit in Anne Arundel County. There are county employees and others that I've mentioned that earn less than this amount, and thus they may not be able to afford to live in this county. This morning I checked the average salary for a police officer starting in the Baltimore metropolitan area, and it's at $53,400. For these reasons, MMHA, Maryland Multi-Housing Association, requests the council approve this bill.
Thank you. Ms. Musha.
Thank you. Ready for my auctioneer voice. My name is CJ Mushra. My address is 3884 Ponder Drive, Edgewater, Maryland, 21037. I currently serve as the supporting co-chair of the Economic Development Committee of the Anne Arundel County NAACP. I'm here to testify today in my role as coordinator with Showing Up for Racial Justice, Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. Surge 3A fights for a fair economy that refuses to pit communities against one another. As you can see by the testimony tonight, that is exactly what this proposed amendment does. For this reason, Surge 3A opposes Bill 9219, amending the Fair Housing Act, allowing persons to provide preferences in the sale, rental, or occupation of housing to the military, veterans, teachers, police officers, firefighters, and those who provide emergency services. Affordable housing is an issue for all, not just the folks listed in this accepted occupational series. This bill has the following unintended consequences. Incentivizes gentrification, incentivizes those in these occupations outside of the county to live in Anne Arundel County and commute outside of the county to work in the county where they actually work. It bakes in indefensibly poor EEO demographic statistics. See the graph in my provided testimony. It institutionalizes penalization of existing residents who are unemployed, low-wage, contract employees of the government, privately employed, or not within an accepted occupation. The Center for Maryland Fair Housing Action Center for Maryland considers current Anne Arundel County fair housing law in good standing with similar regional modernization efforts on the issue. See the graphic included in my testimony. They implore that the stakeholders and the council consider the following questions. How many units of housing will Anne Arundel County lose to families who would have otherwise qualified had the law not changed? Someone should consider, should someone receive special treatment, sometimes at taxpayer expense, because of what they chose as a career? How can individual specific occupations be legally soundly considered their own protected class? Finally, furthermore, Boston College Environmental Affairs Law Review, local preferences in affordable housing, special treatment for those who live or work in a municipality, makes the following sound litigious points against the bill.
Thank you.
You can read that in the testimony.
Thank you very much. Ms. Barbara Samuels.
Thank you. I have some written testimony. I am the managing attorney for fair housing at the ACLU of Maryland, 3600 Clipper Mill Road, Baltimore, Maryland. The ACLU generally opposes exceptions to fair housing and civil rights laws, and I think this bill illustrates why even the pitfalls involved in doing that, even when well-intentioned. So the industry essentially is seeking a blank check for landlords to offer any kind of preferential treatment in the terms and conditions of the sale or rental, not just a rent discount, although that has been the subject of discussion. Now, we recognize the desire to acknowledge the service of teachers, police officers, detention officers, firefighters, and so on, as well as the fact that many employees who work in Anne Arundel County cannot afford to live in Anne Arundel County. But as several of the council members have noted and the administration has noted, the bill, quite aside from the issue of discrimination based on occupation, raises issues of disparate impact based on race, ethnicity, gender, religion, and disability. And in our written testimony, we have included a discussion of an example regarding the demographics of the firefighters, which are 90% white, and the impact of that, and would urge that the county do a racial equity analysis and not just rush into amending the bill that was just so recently passed. The bill is also overbroad in applying to employees who don't actually work in Anne Arundel County, and too narrow in excluding people who do work in Anne Arundel County, like teachers are covered, but school bus drivers are not, or custodians.
Thank you, Ms. Samuels. Thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Waldrop.
Dale Waldrop, 876 Claffey Avenue, Gambrills, Maryland. I speak to you as the Legislative Director for the Detention Officers Union. I'm going to start off with thank you to both of you for this bill. 2 issues. One, cost and time. Cost. We do not pay our officers enough to live in this county. The county's just too expensive. We know this. The starting salary isn't there to afford, a single officer or a officer with a young family starting out. 2, time. So I've been here before. You've heard me talk about overtime, mandatory overtime. So when I have a majority, I would say probably close to 70%, rough guesstimate, that live outside of Anne Arundel County, many over an hour away. So now you do a 16-hour back-to-back shift, and you got to come in the next morning. You figure you got to drive an hour or more to get home, drive another hour more to get back to work the next morning. When are they supposed to sleep? I get the overall issue. Nobody wants to be discriminated against or anything like that. Nobody wants to give anything away that nobody hasn't earned. But in this case, we are investing in our own community. We're investing in Anne Arundel County. That's what this bill does. If there's a better way to build this mousetrap, I would certainly support that as well. But I think that this is a honest, laid effort, and it's in the right direction, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to this panel.
I'm sorry, if I can also just to defend my department, though, we are racially diverse in my department, and so like I said, I don't want anybody to get, we are not predominantly white, predominantly black, or other. We are very racially diverse, and damn good department.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Waldrop. Nancy Race and Joanne Matson are my last 2 that have signed up. Ms. Race?
Nancy Race, 27 Acorn Drive, Annapolis. I'm representing the Anne Arundel Affordable Housing Coalition. The coalition does not support the proposed amendment. We believe allowing preferences for certain types of workers will create exceptions to the fair housing law that would be detrimental to the protected classes under that law. You've heard all the same arguments I'm saying, so I'll leave it at that. I would say we encourage the county to continue to expand on the programs as it has done in recent times and provide funding to increase opportunities for affordable housing throughout the county for a broad range of incomes so that the entire workforce in this county can live in this county. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Matson?
Joanne Matson, 37 Glen Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm with Nancy on the Affordable Housing Coalition. I'm also the executive director of the Lighthouse, which is a homeless prevention and support center in Anne Arundel County, located in Annapolis. I echo the statements of the others who have expressed dissatisfaction with this bill. I can say that I am personally and professionally absolutely passionate about safe and affordable housing in our community. And I'm also passionate about fairness and equity in our housing. And so although I'm fighting with some of you here to provide MPDU legislation, working toward that, which I think that's where we can create those housing opportunities for everyone who works in Anne Arundel County to live in Anne Arundel County if that's where they choose to be. This is not the proper place for that to take place. We have a fair housing law. We need to stick with it. The other thing I will say, as someone coming from the Lighthouse, one of the other pieces, the fair housing law made it against the law to discriminate against someone for source of income. Our concern at the Lighthouse is that potential landlords, homeowners, will use this opportunity to discriminate against people for having a housing voucher. So you could say, I'm holding out for a police officer or a teacher. Let's make housing safe and affordable and fair for all.
Thank you. If anyone wishes to speak on 9219 as amended, please come forward now. State your name and address for the record, and you each have 2 minutes. Mr. Leone?
Good evening. I'm Russell Leone. I live at 1153 Nanacoke Street in Baltimore, Maryland. And that's kind of important as well, because I am one of those teachers who does not live in the county but has worked here since 1998. On behalf of teachers, I have to say this is good for teachers. However, we also, as educators, know that we provide opportunity for our kids, and that is something that we should also be providing for all people. I have to tell you that there isn't a month that goes by that I don't hear from teachers who cannot afford to live in this county. It is definitely a problem. We have teachers well into their 30s who are still having roommates, living like they're in college. We have people who are living with their families. But we also know that we need to make sure that all people have the opportunity to live here in the county as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate the efforts of this bill. I hope that it is not just, I hope it's not the first step. And I hope that we do make sure that there is more being done to make sure that the opportunity is there for all people who need the means to be able to do so. So thank you.
Thank you. It's on.
Thanks. Mary Didoni. I am a commissioner on the Human Relations Commission.
Ma'am, can you state your name and address?
I'm so sorry. Mary Didoni, Edgewater, Maryland.
Thank you.
And I am a commissioner on the Human Relations Commission, which met earlier this evening, although I wasn't present with them. And I am here to deliver a message on behalf of the commission. And in the interest of full disclosure, although not relevant to this testimony, I'm also Secretary of the Anne Arundel County branch of the NAACP. I want to advise the Council that the Commission has not been consulted in regards to Bill 9219, but that based on the limited information we have received, multiple members of the Commission are extremely concerned that the bill will have a discriminatory impact and could significantly weaken the county's fair housing law. Therefore, the Commission strongly urges the Council to make sure that any changes to the fair housing law meant to address the housing affordability crisis do not undermine the protections against discrimination that the law was created to uphold. Thank you.
Sorry, we're having construction trouble behind us.
And who's next?
Sir, you're next.
Ready.
Thank you. State your name and address.
My name is Chris Blanton, 8375 Jumpers Hole Road. I'm the president of FODCOP. That's the Detention Officers of Anne Arundel County. We'd like to thank you for the bill that you put before the citizens. We'd also like to thank you for including detention officers. Too often, my members feel like they're left behind in the realm of public safety. We feel that we are in the heart of public safety. We're always forgotten. We're on the side, but we do a dangerous job. And we'd like to thank you for including us as actually detention officers within the bill. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. The public hearing on Bill number 9219 as amended is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9219 as amended.
Bill number 9219, an ordinance concerning fair housing exceptions.
I believe there's an amendment coming forward.
Yes,
which I can't find. Madam Secretary, do we have any discussions before we go into amendments from my colleagues? Oh, yes, Ms. Rodvian, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel compelled to speak because I originally had come out as a co-sponsor of this bill. And I think the discussion that has come before the council today really is illustrative of the conflict that I've had over this bill as I've come to learn more about the impact. One of my colleagues mentioned earlier tonight that we cannot be experts on everything, and we don't always understand the impact of the things that we are, that we are legislating, and that's why I think this part of the process is so critical, that our bills are published, that people have the opportunity to give input. Obviously, my day job is a public school teacher. I probably say that every meeting that we're here for some reason or another. So I hear very frequently, and I have many colleagues that live outside of the county and some outside of the state. So I'm acutely aware of the need for the public servants of Anne Arundel County to be able to live in the county. However, I could not accept the impact that this bill would have on other very deserving people of having an affordable place to live. So while this bill acknowledges that the affordability crisis hits teachers, police officers, firefighters, detention officers, all kinds of public servants, it also hits many people who are not in those fields, who are unemployed, who are disabled. And we also have a history of discrimination that plays into this as well, that has caused disparity in housing. And so to come full circle, I just really want to say thank you to those that have taken the time to have conversations with me, some very passionate and some very emotional conversations because of the firsthand experiences that people have had, or that they have observed of others that they work with. And so it's not without intent that at another time I will be looking for opportunities to facilitate affordable housing, but that needs to be, including workforce housing for all of the different employee groups that we've touched upon here. But we need to make sure that we're not doing so. We're not solving one problem and creating another one. So again, I really appreciate the conversations, and just with humility, thank you for showing me all the sides of this legislation.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We heard a lot of testimony, and we've had a lot of conversations about the need for everyone, our entire workforce and all of our residents to have the ability to afford a safe, comfortable place to live in the county. I don't think that there is any one piece of legislation that can solve that problem. In fact, we've seen a number of different pieces of legislation in the county that address various aspects of that. Earlier tonight, we discussed the housing for the elderly of moderate means, and that addresses one aspect of a need in the county. We have discussed workforce housing here. We have discussed a variety of things. This is certainly, as I said, not intended to be a one-size-fits-all solution, and I appreciate the comments. I certainly think there's much more that we can do, and there's much more that we should explore. But I do think that this is an important bill for those people who provide some very essential services to the county, and for people who put their life in danger many days to help those of us who live here. So I would ask for support on that basis.
Mr. Volke?
Thank you. Ms. Blair Klassmeyer, this is a question for you. So I want to make sure I get this, because I could be wrong on this. Somebody indicated that if a landlord or someone selling property or something that has to do with housing were to say, I don't want to rent to you because I'm holding out for a teacher, my understanding of the law is that's still going to be a problem. That's still going to be discriminatory. Because what we're saying, at least as I understood it, or at least I thought what we were trying to do, is say that you're allowed to offer a preference. So you're allowed to say, look, if you're a teacher, I'm going to give you a 20% discount on your rent. If you're somebody buying a house, maybe I'm going to give you a certain break because you're in this profession. But I still think that if you have somebody coming before you and you say, nope, I'm not renting to you because I want a teacher, I still would view that as a violation of the Fair Housing Act. Am I missing that?
Well, the word preference would be more than discount. So I guess if you had a number of candidates and some fit within these categories, like a police officer or a teacher, and some were not, you would be allowed to rent to the teacher before you rented to the, if this passes, to the other person on the list. So it's not necessarily just, the word preference I think is broader than just maybe a discount or something.
Okay.
Or, you get the nicer countertops or whatever the, whatever it would be.
Yeah. And so if the landlord or the seller or whoever the person may be said, I don't have anybody else in the hopper. I don't have anybody else that I know of who's coming down the pipe right now, but you're in front of me and I don't want to rent to you because I'm waiting for someone else. Do you think that would fall in the preference world? Maybe we need another definition.
Yeah, oh my. I'm not entirely sure about that particular one. I mean, it does seem to be problematic to me. But I can't say I can't say 100% that I've ever seen that or seen the resolution of that issue.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? We're good. All right. I think, Madam Secretary, I'm supposed to say, please read the title of Bill number 9219 as amended.
No, we're now into the amendments. So
There's an amendment.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's right.
I have an amendment, Madam Chair.
Yes, I know you do. It's sitting in front of me. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 4.
Amendment number 4, this amendment adds all non-elected Anne Arundel County employees who earn less than the median household income is defined by the Baltimore Primary Metropolitan Statistical Area to the list of specific occupations accepted from fair housing provisions regarding the sale, rental, or occupancy of housing in the county.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, Mr. Volke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, I'm going to go back to something one of my colleagues said earlier. I think the description accurately describes what this amendment does, so I'm not going to go too much deeper than that, only to say that I don't think we as elected officials should be up here passing laws that are benefiting us, so that's why we're out of this category. And there have been a number of people who have indicated that we're sort of cherry-picking professions, and I frankly would agree with that. And I think what's probably the right thing to do is to say all county employees who are county employees are covered, and we want to make sure we're not, grabbing department heads. No offense to department heads in the room, but these are people who actually would need a preference as opposed to those who can afford it. So that's this amendment.
Ms. Lacy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll comment first about this amendment. I actually disagree that that it shouldn't apply if we were to adopt this amendment, which I'm not going to support it, but I do want to just say, for the purpose of the record and the rhetoric that we have going on now, council members would need to be included because our pay is less than the median.
Way less.
Way less. And it would be unjust not to include us because it's mandatory that we live in the county.
I'm okay with the injustice.
So, I'm not. I will not bake that in. But that is just a specific example of the larger principle, which is that if you, don't earn enough to benefit from whether it's this amendment or this bill, there's still going to be unjust and inequitable results in a lot of areas. And the purpose of the fair housing law, including protection from source of income discrimination and from occupation discrimination, they actually complement each other. They're not opposed. So the purpose of doing that is we had, and I hope we still will have, a clear law that says you shall not discriminate on the following bases. But that's different from a couple of questions that we've tried to distinguish through work sessions and prior discussions on this bill on the subject of providing preferences and the difference, the lower sort of lower tier of discounts or incentives. The way I see it, a discount for housing is something that could be offered by a landlord or a seller, whereas an incentive could be offered by a government, as in the employer, to achieve very specific policy purposes, such as building a diverse workforce, and that would be okay. And if we were to do that, we should do it by a separate bill. The administration should hopefully be behind that. That should be just a totally separate piece of our law that talks about incentives for recruitment and retention, because the question ultimately is, who's paying for this? When you talk about the discounts, which as I've understood from this discussion, we're not only concerned about, say, a 10% discount, we might be concerned about a $20 discount. That's something that's just really a token recognition of someone's service, which we haven't heard any actual complaints about, where there haven't been enforcement actions. We're not concerned that that's a likely legal possibility. On the other hand, we know that everyone can benefit from having the opportunity to live near their work, and also that everyone in the county can benefit by having, our public safety officers, our teachers, and the other groups that we've been speaking about, being able to live in the communities where they work. So then, the way the bill is written, we're talking about who pays for these preferences, or they're really discounts because they're allowed to make them, private employers or private landlords. On the other hand, if we do something totally separate that is about overall enhancing the quality of life in the county by making specific recruitment and retention efforts that are compensation in a way that allows the underrepresented folks in the different occupations to be able to live in the county like we've discussed, who's going to pay for that? The government, the taxpayers. Everybody pays from that, but everybody benefits also. And I think what we're talking about fundamentally is a difference between a public interest and the private interest. And so these amendments, and it's amendment number 4, but the other amendments that I opposed, but they're currently adopted, they all work toward that private interest side of the scales. And I think what we were trying to accomplish through the fair housing law, not just think, but I'm certain I know from co-sponsoring it, is to balance that out on the public side. So I reiterate what the arguments that I've made in opposition to the other amendments, and I hope you all will join me in opposing this bill and working together to find other means to accomplish the purposes that we are allowed to accomplish to increase diversity in these categories we've talked about.
Mr. Pruski?
Madam Chair, since it was brought up in this amendment about Baltimore primary metropolitan statistical data, and some of the other reports, of course, we're not going to get into citing those today, but the real issue is the lack of affordable housing. We're talking about fair housing policy. You know, we have an opportunity with the GDP coming up to set more opportunity to have affordable housing. Whether you're a police officer, teacher, no matter who you pick, certainly our hiring practices, but I just want to remind everyone, certainly we're talking about a bill with fair housing exceptions, well then we should also be talking about where are the opportunities to actually have the housing. You know, I think we're missing we're looking through the trees without the forest, not to go back to the Forest Con bill here. But
please don't.
I just have to say that. I mean, I think people keep talking about they want to do something. Well, let's put our mouth where we're talking about when we do the GDP, when all the folks have to make those tough decisions about where housing goes in terms of density, near, you know, areas, and obviously not based upon income where people can go. Then we'll really do something for people who need housing.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. I respect all my colleagues and their points, and I respect the opponents of this too, and I think that the arguments that they're making are valid. I think there are valid arguments on both sides. I just want to be clear about what we're trying to do with this bill. My understanding is that in light of the Fair Housing Act that passed this year, actually last year, effectively what people in the private industry have taken away is we're not going to be allowed to offer these types of preferences anymore to police, teachers, firefighters, et cetera. That's been their understanding, how they're reading and interpreting the law. So my concern is that I would like to allow them to still have those types of incentives or discounts that they're offering to people in these occupations. And my concern is that if we don't do this bill, what's going to happen is the private industry is basically going to say to their folks, the people who are the landlords and the renters, listen, you got to stop that now. And then all of a sudden, our police officers and teachers and firefighters are going to be coming to us and saying, why in the world did I stop getting that discount that I was getting? I can't afford to live. I got to be out. And so at that point, then I feel like we may be back dealing with this again, because if there's an outcry from those folks, I think we're all going to hear it. But that's the purpose of this. It's not to codify discrimination. It's not to sort of put into place these systemic effects of racism that we're hearing about, which are legitimate and real. The purpose and really the reason for this amendment is to try to expand it out beyond those sort of couple of groups that we were talking about, because I am sensitive to the idea that there are custodial staff employees, there are secretarial employees, other people who don't fall into the teacher, police officer, firefighter categorization, who we want to make sure we're helping. So that's where I'm coming from on this. That's kind of where my heart's at on this. I know that people may look at this and view it differently, but hopefully at least we can all kind of come at it from a place of what we're trying to do, and not always have to look at it and think that we're trying to tear each other apart, because that's really not the purpose of this. So I just want to leave it with that as we kind of close the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also was an original co-sponsor of the original bill. I have since seen the error of my ways. But we have an opportunity in this county to increase the amount of affordable housing. And I hope when those bills are before this council, we will have such a robust and supportive debate around affordable housing. This bill amends our fair housing law. So I've said it, I keep saying it. This bill is about fair housing. We have other legislation coming that is about affordable housing. So thank you. And do we have any other comments? The administration?
On the amendment, appreciate that both Councilwoman Lacey's statements. Let me phrase it this way. Agnostic on the amendment. If the council adopts it, it is not going to cure the administration's concerns with the bill as a whole.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 4.
Ms. Rodvian?
No.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacey?
Nay.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Nay.
Ms. Pickard?
Nay.
2 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative, 1 absent. Amendment number 4 is defeated.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9219.
Ms. Rodvian?
Nay.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Nay.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Nay.
Ms. Pickard?
Nay.
2 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative, 1 absent. Bill number 9219 is defeated.
Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9319.
Bill number 9319, an ordinance concerning Cape St. Clair Special Community Benefit District, approval of loan and assignment agreement.
This is an administration bill. I'll let you assemble your team.
Sure. Joining me at the table is Mr. Beecham from Budget, Mr. Michelson from DPW, and Ms. Blair Klausmeyer from Office of Law. Bill 9319 deals with the Cape St. Clair Special Community Benefit District. It is for levying the Special Community Benefit Assessment to repay a loan made to the Cape St. Clair Improvement Association. The loan is to fund beach restoration and shore erosion prevention and a shore erosion prevention project on community-owned property. In addition to the loan, the community will receive grants from the county and the Chesapeake Bay Trust to complete the project. If I'm not mistaken, there also may be some state dollars that could be coming to this project. The loan complies with Cape St. Clair's Special Community Benefit District's purpose, which includes erosion prevention. The county is not pledging its full faith and credit and will not become a creditor of the bank. Any costs the county will incur in administering the multi-year payment of the loan will be offset by the administrative fee charged when taxes are collected. This is in Councilwoman Fiedler's district, who we all heard had to leave. I do want to thank her for her co-sponsorship of the bill.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council? We will now open the public hearing. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I do have one gentleman signed up, Mr. Bo Breeden.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. My name is Bo Breeden. I live at 1246 Mount Pleasant Drive in Cape St. Clair. I'm here representing the Cape St. Clair Improvement Association today. We'd like to thank the council members for the opportunity to be heard and be able to provide some additional information regarding 9319 and the need for a $650,000 loan from BB&T to the CSCIA for a shoreline restoration capital project. The Improvement Association has been working since 2015 on a comprehensive erosion control and shoreline restoration project at the mouth of the Magathie River in Chesapeake Bay at 2 separate sites on community-owned beaches. As with most waterfront communities, we're suffering from an impact of tremendous erosion. Our erosion rate is roughly 3 feet annually, as established by the Department of Natural Resources. This is due to both natural causes, but significant wave action that we receive from the commercial shipping channel of the Chesapeake Bay. We need significant investment in comprehensive capital project to save our shorelines, reestablish native habitat, and waterfront amenities. Our 8,000 residents care deeply about our community amenities and have lamented the visible loss of beach, aquatic habitat, and recreational opportunities. To date, we have spent $204,500 of self-funding through our SCBD. We've been awarded a $298,000 grant through the Chesapeake Bay Trust and Arundel County Watershed Protection and Restoration Program, along with $25,000 pledged through the bond bill program through the state. Funding will complete our Site 1 project. We hope to have that construction here this spring before our Strawberry Festival in June and be done that project at that point in time. We're also partnering with the Alliance of the Chesapeake Bay on additional grants in hopes of better coordination between state, local, nonprofit funding sources. We'll again be applying for Chesapeake Bay Trust and Watershed Project and Restoration Program grant this spring. Currently have $50,000 at U.S. Atlantic Coastal Fish Habitat grant application under review. We also have co-sponsored by our senator and delegates for a 4th year in a row for another bond bill request towards the comprehensive project. We're currently in final permitting with the Department of Environment and expect to be shovel ready this spring. The multiple site project's $1 million+ project. We will slow erosion, treat upland water runoff, reestablish critical marsh areas, and provide needed hard structures and offshore protections for our shorelines. We answer any questions. Thank you.
You did well. That was a lot in 2
Yep.
minutes. Is there, that's the only person I have signed up. Did anyone have any questions of Mr. Breeden?
Just wanted to say why we're spending $650.
I hear you.
Okay.
I don't see any movement in the audience, so the public hearing on Bill number 9319 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9319.
Bill number 9319, an ordinance concerning Cape St. Clair Special Community Benefit District approval of loan and assignment agreement.
Is there any further discussion? I think I will chime in on behalf of my colleague who's not here and just say that the county and the community is very pleased to see the efforts of the Cape St. Clair community. I know, I can hear Ms. Fiedler's words. I think she said it before, so thank you for all that y'all are doing to take care of your community. Mr. Barron?
Nothing further to add, other than to just give a shout out to Mr. Michelson and the work that his team has done in protecting our waterways.
Did you have anything to add, Mr. Michelson?
We talked a little bit about it at the work session, but
Sure.
we really just think this is a nice example of a public-private partnership where we've got the county dollars coming to match the community dollars and get a great project in the ground.
Great, thank you. Seeing no further discussion from my colleagues, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9319.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Bill number 9319 is passed.
Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9419.
Bill number 9419, an ordinance concerning boards, commissions, and similar bodies, Human Relations Commission.
This is an administration bill along with Ms. Lacy. Did the administration want to open the conversation?
Sure, happy to. Good evening again. Joining with me at the table from the County Exec's office is Ms. Schultz, and from Office of Law, Ms. Blair Klausmeyer. Bill 9419 clarifies the composition and power of the Human Relations Commission. In the previous bill that codified the Human Relations Commission, that was Bill 5719, we narrowed the scope to only allow the Human Relations Commission to address discrimination when it came to housing. The previous commission was permitted or charged with exploring other and combating other forms of discrimination. We believe it was unintentional and the intent of, not the intent of the council. This bill will not expand powers outside of housing, but will clarify that the commission can continue the work that it did under previous incarnations with regard to other forms of discrimination. We do have a few additional amendments that we will discuss at the appropriate time, and I understand there might be a council amendment or two. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Schultz to discuss a little bit more on this.
Thank you. Like Mr. Barron mentioned, we are simply removing the words "in housing" from its purpose for the Codified Human Relations Commission. And also another change made in the bill is that the original bill that was drafted stated that 7 of its members came from the 7 council districts, and the other 4 needed to reflect the ethnic and minority diversity of the county. This bill clarifies that 7 still comes from the council, 4 come from the county executive, and any 4 of the 11 need to broadly reflect the citizens of the county. We will be offering 2 amendments at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Do I have any questions of my colleagues? Okay. We will now open the public hearing. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I do have 3 individuals signed up on this bill. Mr. Stephen Waddy, Mr. Patrick Enright, and Mr. Tim Grooms. As you come forward and take your seat, remind you to state your name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes. Mr. Waddy.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Waddy, and I am Is on? Okay,
It is
I'm sorry.
now.
Oh, okay. My name is Stephen White. I'm here as the Political Action Chair on behalf of President Jacqueline Alsop in the Anne Arundel County branch of the NAACP. The NAACP believes that this bill needs some work. The NAACP supports the removal of housing from purpose. We believe that section regarding the number and type of members needs further work. And we also do support the need to amend Section 35A 202 to reflect the new purpose. Reflected in 35A 102A. So that's the, we also agree that the powers of the Human Relations Commission should be expanded and have a opportunity to address the issues of affordable housing and housing within the county.
Thank you. Mr. Enright?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. My name is Patrick Enright. I should say ladies of the staff, too. My name is Patrick Enright on Huntwood Drive in Gambrills. I'm here to support Bill 9419 because it's necessary and timely. It's necessary because of the broadening of its purview beyond housing and beyond 5719 to include all forms of discrimination. And it is timely because I experienced an irony last week of discrimination. On Wednesday, my wife received her copy of the AARP bulletin whose front cover story concerned ageism in the workplace. Several hours before that on Wednesday, the Supreme Court of the United States heard oral arguments in a case involving Norris Babb versus Secretary Wilkie of the Department of Veterans Affairs, which also was an ageism complaint. And the readout on that, decision on that will come before the end of June of this year. So the timeliness and also discussions on 9219 tonight on the possibilities of discrimination in Bill 9219. So there's a timeliness here, and it also that age discrimination and other forms of discrimination still exist and are on the rise. This bill will have some adjustments, and I hope after that it passes, and when it does, I wish to reiterate my proposal to elevate the commission in the county charter, hopefully next to the Ethics Commission. I yield, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Grooms?
Hello, Tim Grooms, 411 Willow Bend Drive, Glen Burnie, Maryland. Just want to say I believe it is important to have the County Human Rights Commission, but believe the wording in the bill should not be so generalized. The proposal, I guess, is to change the statement from discrimination in housing to just discrimination. In the current form, the purpose of the Human Rights Commission is defined, and in this proposed change, it is not defined. But by just using the word discrimination, I believe it leaves what the Human Rights Commission does to be generalized and possibly open for criticism by tackling too much instead of focusing on core issues. In doing some research of human rights commissions and what they do, I'm asking that instead of using the generalized word discrimination, that you all come up with a clearly defined definition of what the Human Rights Commission will hear. The Human Rights Commission bill should clearly define areas of discrimination and identify groups that will be protected. I checked surrounding counties, and they all are very definitive about what their Human Rights Commissions are and what they do. Generally, they are defined by investigating, enforcing, or complying with county mandates on complaints of employment, housing, public accommodation, bias-related harassment, and law enforcement. So hopefully you all will take this into account before passing this change in the bill and making it too generalized and not clearly defined. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone in the audience that cares to speak on this bill that did not sign up? Come forward now, state your name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mary Didoni, Edgewater, Maryland. It seemed appropriate that since you had a member of the Human Relations Commission in the audience, I should at least acknowledge that this bill was here. We have in the commission discussed a number of amendments. I believe we had asked for some of them, that there was a recognition that in the codifying this, some of the scope of the prior commission had been lost. There is a desire to have the input of a student member. We understand it can't be a student member, but we wish to have that, we discussed and wish to have that voice. We have become aware this evening of the proposed additional amendments. The Commission has not, to my knowledge, been able to discuss them. I've only communicated them to the chair. But with respect to the financial disclosure, it is my understanding that that is standard for commissions that have this authority, and it really is a question about what are sources of incomes for the major income generating persons in the household. As I said, we have not had as a commission a chance to discuss that. My understanding about hearings will have to hinge on the definition of the word hearings. The commission currently understands that it has the right to have public forums, but a hearing is a specific type of gathering to gather evidence around housing discrimination. And so I invite comment on that from others when the discussions are held. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 9419 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9419.
Bill number 9419, an ordinance concerning boards, commissions, and similar bodies, Human Relations Commission.
I'll let the administration get settled. There are some amendments. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1, this amendment adds an Anne Arundel County Public High School student as a non-voting member of the Human Relations Commission and establishes the requirements for and the term of the student membership.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Mr. Barron for the administration.
And this is an administration amendment. It comes from conversations with the Human Relations Commission. We think it is a good idea to get young people involved, and this is one way.
Do you have any discussion from my colleagues? No. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2, this amendment requires each voting member of the Human Relations Commission to file financial disclosure statements with the Ethics Commission.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
This is also an administration amendment.
Sure. The administration asked you move this. This was discussed at the work session. Ms. Schultz just whispered to me there are 15 other commissions that have to do a similar disclosure, generally when they have powers like the Human Relations Commission. So this just will help ensure trust.
Is there any discussion from my colleagues? Questions for the administration? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 2 is adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 3.
Amendment number 3, this amendment requires that 4 of the 11 voting members of the Human Relations Commission reflect the ethnic and minority diversity of the residents of the county.
This is sponsored by Ms. Lacy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The intent here is to restore a language that the bill would have cut with the phrase ethnic and minority diversity of the residents of the county. I don't think, as the bill was written, and I sponsored it right out of the gate, I don't think it was intended to narrow by using the word be broadly representative. I don't think it was meant to narrow what was originally meant by ethnic and minority diversity, but words matter, and since I think in that case my preference is to keep the original words, and they're just moved to the appropriate place in the bill. And I would add that while I think the intent is to keep the same, that's what's written here, I just want to put on the record that I think we should say 4 or more. I would add to the number of voting members, or at least make some, some statement showing that it doesn't have to just be 4. I'd like us to see more, but that would be a separate discussion on another night.
It says at least 4 in it, so, yes.
I'm not sure my version had.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
I think we need to move and second the amendment, so I would move it.
I would agree with that point of order, and I'll second that amendment so that we can have the discussion.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Is it? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the spot in the original bill. At least. Oh, good. Well, I don't know where I thought that disappeared. I'm glad you all agree. Yeah.
We agree, yes.
Thank you.
Did the administration have?
So on the amendment, we're going to have a couple of comments. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Schultz, but I'm going to steal a little bit of her thunder first.
Sexist. Just
now I feel like I have to close my mouth. The intent here was, as the councilwoman stated, it was not to narrow the charge of both the council and the county executive, who both have a role in making these appointments, of the background to make sure that it is reflective of the ethnic and minority diversity of the county. There were some logistical issues, and I'm going to turn it over to my wise colleague to discuss.
I just want to say, I hope that the council understands that there are certain questions that I, as the Boards and Commissions Coordinator, cannot ask applicants, and so that's why we changed the language so that it's something that I can refer to. The administration is committed to having a diverse Human Relations Commission, and as you can see by the current makeup of the newly appointed Human Relations Commission, that it is very diverse. And I don't see ever in the future that those that are interested in serving on this commission would be anything but a diverse collection of those that reside in the county.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may respond. I just think, as a matter of principle, that our law can say that we want to have the ethnic and minority diversity of the county reflected without that being a constraint on it. And I was at the work session, I heard and I understand, but I'm also a lawyer, and I think you can write anything in a way that it would not violate, the rules against asking someone directly, versus saying, encouraging people to say, tell us, check the box if there's something else you want to tell me, which you could do because our code can say we need to have this diversity. That's part of our policy goal that we're supporting with the original law, and that's why I don't want to change it.
I understand that. I go forward to say, is there anything about your background that you'd like to share with me? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. I mean, the person could tell me that they're sisters from Nevada, or it could be strictly about what they identify as. Lawfully, I'm not at liberty to ask any more than that. So, therefore, if I search people and take the extra effort to make all the boxes checked, that's fine and good. But I could also be misinterpreting somebody of what I think they might identify as, and they don't. And I'm not trying to offend anybody. So the language is what it is. Whatever the wording, I hope to have the same result, as in, yes, let's have this be a diverse group of folks serving on the Human Relations Commission.
Do we have an opinion from the Office of Law on this verbiage?
No. I mean,
Well, would you care to comment
on the difference or on the, I think this is more of a practical issue. I mean, I think that's what, Kaylee has requested this amendment because of a practical issue in the application process. I don't think there's a legal, I mean, broadly representative of the citizens of the county, and I understand how she's, and I think it's a matter of intent.
Okay.
The administration is going to remain committed to making sure that any appointment to this commission and other commissions are reflective of the diversity of the county. So, we asked to give us a little bit more of the logistical help, which is what we asked for in the original draft of the bill. But whether or not the council accepts this amendment, we remain committed and will strive to make sure that we are achieving that goal.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Lacey.
I keep trying not to comment, but I have to. I just have to. I know. Look, I know I'm not the county attorney, and our attorney has stepped away, so I'm at liberty to say what I want to say, okay? I think the code should say what it needs to say for the benefit of the residents of the county. Legal cover for how the administration goes about doing what it needs to do is a separate thing. And that the strength of that language of the ethnic and minority diversity of the county is historically and presently important. And so I think if broadly representative would be okay legally to put into our code, it's okay legally to put on the form, I think. Because it dances around the concept, and that's the point. This law is primarily for our residents who are still celebrating that we codified the Human Relations Commission in the first place. And if it were still under executive order, you could certainly go ahead and make this change.
Correct.
But we've legislated this.
And that's a good thing.
And that's a good reason to keep it.
Okay. I've hit the wall. Madam Secretary, is there any further discussion? Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 3.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 3 is adopted.
All right. Moving right along, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9519.
Okay. And Madam Chairman, Bill number 9419 is amended. We'll be back on February 3rd. Right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I meant to say that. These are going to be some good minutes.
Bill number 9519, an ordinance concerning public works utilities subsidies for wastewater extension project costs.
How you doing?
Councilwoman Hare, this is your bill. Would you like to kick off the conversation?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's my favorite topic, sanitary sewer. So I will try to keep this brief because we've talked a lot about this at a couple of work sessions now, and we had a prior bill, Bill number 9019, that was passed in December that had the same background information. So this is all the same background information. We have a problem in the county. It's countywide with septic systems that are problematic or in some cases failing, not working properly, that are both causing a public health problem and an environmental problem by having effluent with large amounts of nitrogen that eventually reaches the bay or otherwise gets into the groundwater, et cetera. If y'all remember, Bill 99, well, let me go back a little bit. Homeowners who have these septic systems can convert to public sewer at a great expense. It's roughly $60,000, $65,000 per house on average. If they pay for that through bonding, through the county, through the petition process, that can be an additional mortgage payment every year. That can be cost prohibitive, and as a result, we don't see a lot of successful petition projects in the county. So we're sort of stuck with this $1.5 billion backlog of additional infrastructure that's needed to help fix this problem, and no real way to do it. So we started looking at ways to incentivize those homeowners who have this problem to convert to public sewer their existing homes. Bill 9019 was the deferral piece. This is sort of a sister bill. It would be what I would call enabling legislation that allows the county to utilize utility fund dollars to incentivize monetarily these projects on a one-by-one basis, subject to 5 criteria that we've laid out in the code. Those 5 criteria are the proximity of a proposed project to existing wastewater infrastructure. Number 2 is environmental and health benefits of the project. Number 3 are other engineering considerations. How feasible is the project, sort of a thing. Number 4, whether or not there is an availability of funds. This is not something where we're going to spend ourselves into oblivion if the utility fund doesn't have it. Number 5, the financial viability of the wastewater extension project. And number 6, I'm sorry, 6 criteria, not 5. Number 6, any federal or state aid that we may get. It's really important to note that this is not mandatory. This is something that DPW can consider along with any other budgetary constraints it might face in any year. It would enable them to evaluate it, put a project in their budget if they believed that it was one that met this criteria and made sense for the county. The county executive would then consider it and potentially put it in his budget, and the county council would then still have final authority over it in our budget. So it goes through a number of approvals. This bill, as I mentioned, it's the second bill. It came out of the task force, the septic task force, 6 months worth of task force meetings or so. And I will leave it at that. I hope you'll support it. If you have any other questions, I am happy to discuss the mechanics of it. Mr. Phipps, Matt Johnson, Mr. Barron, I'm not sure if you all have any other comments you'd like to add.
Do you have some comments, Mr. Wilkie?
Questions?
You have a question. Well, shall we let the administration respond? Okay. Would the administration like to weigh in on Bill number 9619 or whatever we're talking about? 9519.
Thank you. Joining me at the table is Mr. Johnson from the County Exec's Office, our environmental officer, Mr. Heiner, Mr. Phipps from DPW, and Ms. Blair Klausmeyer from Office of Law. Just to show I am a little bit of an equal opportunity offender, I'm going to steal some of Mr. Johnson's thunder. So the administration overall supports this bill. A lot of work has been done on it, and I'm going to let Mr. Johnson and Mr. Phipps speak to some of the more technical aspects of this bill, but I think Councilwoman Hare hit the nail on the head about what we are trying to do, which is clean up the bay and find ways to get rid of failing septic systems, which put a lot of you-know-what in our water. The county's committed to meeting our long-term plan to comply with the state Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load, which is making sure that we are reducing nitrogen that we are letting go into the bay. This is, and you have a map in your packet. This is not a just an issue in one part of the county. There are failing septic systems everywhere. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Phipps and Mr. Johnson if you have anything else to add. But generally, the administration supports the bill. We will be offering an amendment at the appropriate time.
which I hope is friendly.
Mr. Johnston, for the record, Environmental Policy Director. Actually, at 10:30, I'm going to let him steal all my thunder, and I know there are some questions. So I think we've talked about this quite a bit with the previous bill. We've talked about it in a couple of work sessions and now a couple of county council sessions. So I think everyone understands the citizens of this county have really committed dollars already to the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. This council continues to fund great stormwater improvements, and this is the third leg of that stool for our Chesapeake Bay cleanup effort, the septics. And we're really appreciative that this council is tackling that. And I'll hand it over to Mr. Phipps.
Thank you. This is Chris Phipps, Director of Public Works. And I think what I'd like to do is just take us where we started from very briefly. We were staring at 20,000 septic systems that would need to be converted, costing us close to $1.5 billion. That was the original watershed implementation plan necessary to meet our TMDL. Since that time, we've done very well with our wastewater plants, so well, we're overperforming, that through the task force efforts, we've been able to scale that 20,000 septic systems back to 6,000. And if you do the numbers on that, that would cost $396 million at the $66,000 per. And since with the task force and this bill, really what we're, and likely we would have to make that to make it work, a mandatory program. But we know that, you know, coming to individuals and requiring them to convert their septic systems to public sewer is somewhat of an unfunded mandate. This notion of, okay, can we incentivize these projects to bring some money to the table to make it easier was really where we landed, to make it basically a voluntary program. And that brought our costs down to $99 million over, we have to recognize, this is over a 70-year period is what we're looking at. 30 years of the program, 40-year payback after that. So in the grand scheme of things, we've brought the program costs down for the county considerably. So now we look at it as 25 cents on the dollar is the county's contribution to solving what's otherwise a huge nitrogen and bacteria issue. We tend to not talk about bacteria, but that's also an issue that would be addressed through this program. So to us, we think this is over the course of the program, over the life of the program, we think it's an investment. We're buying a commodity, which is nitrogen reduction towards the TMDL, taking advantage of the exceptional performance of our plants. So we just think it's the right thing to do to move the ball forward, because without an incentive, the program's not going to move forward. It's dead in its tracks based on historical records. And without this, so if you go back to pre-deferral and pre this subsidy, Ms. Hare, that's a high mortgage too. It's like $2,700 a year is what the unsubsidized, and that's with the BRF funding, no county funding, $2,700 a year. So we're trying to, this was basically cut that in half.
Thank you, Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Phipps, I'm going to ask about cost, which I know is a surprise to everyone. I guess my question to you would be this: when you're sort of looking at the value of this 25% subsidy that the county is going to offer, I get the numbers, I get how it runs a negative cash flow for a long time, it then turns positive with certain assumptions, it could be negative with other assumptions. The reality is there are probably more benefits beyond just the dollars here, because one of the things that I think Mr. Johnson mentioned at the work session was this is the equivalent of taking bags of nitrogen and pouring them into the bay, right? What a leaking septic system is doing.
Not pouring them into the bay. The equivalent of
not pouring them. Right, right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
We on the right bill?
It's getting late. It's getting late. And so I get that. I guess my question would be, what's the cost that you would expect the county to pay to have to clean up that equivalent if it was going into the waterway? Because that's kind of the way that if I'm looking at the 12.5, and if that's our subsidy that we're kicking in, and we say, well, it's going to cost us $25,000 to clean up that mess if it were to go in, well, now obviously we're cash positive. That makes a lot of sense for us. That's what I'm trying to understand about this bill, because I get the rest of it, and I understand why you want to run it this way. I understand your fund is solvent, and this is going to come out of separate monies that are not general fund monies. I get all of that. I just want to make sure that from a cost-benefit analysis, I believe the benefit is there. I just haven't seen the number yet.
Sure, I'll touch on something that Eric Michelson has talked to me about, and that is the cost per pound of nitrogen from the WPRP efforts. That can run $13,000, $15,000 for urban stormwater practices.
Per pound?
Per pound.
And did you say the bags were 15-pound bags or something?
4 pound.
4 pound. I don't know where I got 15.
But if you put this into perspective there, I believe that a 25% subsidy on the average connection works out to $16,750.
And you're getting a $42,000 benefit if you take it at $13,000 a pound times 4.
I didn't do the math with you, but sure. So that would be the opportunity. You're not doing the stormwater practice. You're doing this instead. And whenever you put forward that $16,750, you're getting 10 pounds of nitrogen reduced.
I got you. I think we're all getting to the same place. I'm just doing my math maybe a little differently, but I get your point. Did you want to add anything, Mr. Phillips?
Well, just that, yes, the metrics that we use, they do vary if you're looking at the cost a pound reduced through the ENR upgrades at the plant. They were the most effective because we were reducing so much nitrogen. Even though that cost us $250 million, that program, we reduced nitrogen many times over than what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
The next cost-effective is really septic conversions without any subsidy, and that's $4,500 a pound removed. This, with the subsidy, what we're paying to remove, because the homeowner's paying, roughly it's 25% is the county, 25% is the state through the BRF, and 50% is coming from the homeowner. So that's where that 25 cents on the dollar comes from. That 25-cent investment from the county translates to about $1,100 per pound nitrogen removed versus $13,000 on the high end for stormwater. But even if we had the most cost-effective stormwater project, it might be $6,000 a pound removed. Here we're getting it for $1,100 a pound removed.
Got it. I think I tracked most of that. If not, I'll send you an email. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions from my colleagues. We'll now open the public hearing. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Don't move, because there's no one signed up for this bill. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this bill? Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing for this bill is now closed. For Bill number 9519 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9519.
Bill number 9519, an ordinance concerning public works utilities subsidies for wastewater extension project costs.
There is an amendment being offered by the administration. Madam Secretary, can you please read amendment number 1?
Amendment number 1. This amendment adds definitions of combined gross income, and properties with existing improvements, requires an application for a subsidy be made by the property owner, and changes the fixed subsidy for the entire project to a per-property subsidy based on the income of the owners.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion from the administration like to present this, please?
Sure, we ask the council move the amendment. I believe it's being accepted as friendly. The purpose of this amendment is to ensure that we are focusing these subsidies on those with the most need.
And I'll just add to that, it's also to mimic our now county incentive to the same way that the state gives out their incentive for these hookups. The state also reduces theirs by 50% whenever the household income is over $300,000. And there's a reference in this amendment to the COMAR section that defines that income. So if COMAR changes that income level, ours would also change along with it. So we're just mimicking the state here.
Thank you. Ms. Hare?
I'm just going to say I agree. It's friendly. I support the amendment. We talked about this a little bit in the task force. We sort of never netted out at a definite yes or no, but it was definitely something we considered. Part of the reason we settled on the 25% subsidy in the first place was because we looked at a countywide sort of willingness to pay based on survey responses that were sent out, and actually then tracked based on income, if it was given to us by the family or the property, their willingness to pay, and there was a higher willingness to pay at the higher income levels. And so it's my understanding, based on talking with Department of Public Works, that splitting this the way the state has done it will not have a detrimental impact to the overall project. And Nathan, you'll be happy to know this then saves the county some more money.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Radvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Bill number 9519, as amended, will be heard on Monday, February 3rd, 2020. Moving right along. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9619.
Bill number 9619, an ordinance concerning licensing swimming pools lifeguards.
Thank you. This is a bill sponsored by Ms. Fiedler. This bill generated no conversation or questions at the work session. It's very straightforward. Did the administration have anything to?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Hare.
I was just going to say I have a statement from Ms. Fiedler to read, if that would be helpful.
Perfect.
So she just says, this bill is a common sense bill that will help our public and private pools adequately staff their facilities by hiring certified lifeguards who are 15 years of age. This is the same requirement in state law. I ask for the support of my colleagues.
Thank you. Would the administration like to weigh in?
Sure, happy to. Joining me from Department of Health is Mr. Kurdian. From Law, Ms. Blair Klausmeyer. We have no issue with this bill. The sponsor and the administration discussed it at length beforehand. It is a simple bill. The state allows a lifeguard to be licensed at 15, but county code did not allow us to hire them until 16. This would allow a couple of young lifeguards to get started and will help with our staffing issues. And if you have anything to add, feel free.
We definitely support it, and it matches, what the state code is, as well as what's recommended by the Red Cross and the YMCA as well.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I do have Ms. Novelle Navarro signed up. Oh, she's here. Yes, ma'am.
Well, even though there's no opposition, I'll say something.
State your name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Noelle Navarro, and I reside my business at 797 Cromwell Park Drive in Glen Burnie. I want to thank Ms. Fiedler for sponsoring this legislation and hearing my plea, and the members for reviewing House Bill 9619. And our company, Ace Aquatics, manages over 50 commercial swimming pools in Anne Arundel County. I've been hiring lifeguards for commercial swimming pools since 1998. So many things have changed in my industry over these 22 years, but one thing that has not changed is that the success of my business directly relates to the ability to attract, hire, and train young people to work as lifeguards in community pools. Here's some facts to support the need to change the law. Fewer teens today seek summer jobs than they did 20 years ago. According to Fact Tank, the percentage of 16 to 19-year-olds who work in the summer has dropped from about 50% in the past 20 years to 34%. The U.S. Bureau of Statistics currently reports 6.8 million job openings and an unemployment rate of 3.7%. The approved lifeguard training certification programs in Anne Arundel County allow 15-year-olds to certify as lifeguards. Comar allows 15 years of age as long as they have the appropriate training certification.
The current county code requires pool operators to staff at pools, and they must be 16 years of age or higher, and requires one at each public pool. This requirement would limit a 15-year-old lifeguard to working at pools with older lifeguards. Several surrounding counties allow 15-year-olds to work as lifeguards, and some of the 15-year-olds that I've hired from Anne Arundel County in the past have had to burden their parents to drive them to these counties to work where they can use their certification. Most pool management companies like myself currently hire foreign workers due to lifeguard staffing shortages. If this law is changed to allow 15-year-olds to work as lifeguards, the need for foreign workers to supplement staffing will be reduced.
Thank you, Ms. Navarro. Thank you so much for waiting us out. If there's anyone who did not sign up and who wishes to speak, please come forward. Please state your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Lee Jenkins, Suburban Way, Crownsville. And I'll take just a brief second here. I'm the general manager at Anchor Aquatics, locally owned and operated swimming pool management company. We hire over 200 lifeguards a year, and in our 50 years in Anne Arundel County, that's thousands of lifeguards. Most everything Noelle just stated is on my paper here, so I'll skip to the fact that the U.S. Department of Labor also suggests or permits lifeguards at 15 years old, so there's another support for that, and that's all I have to add.
Thank you. I'll see your guards this summer. Y'all manage my pool. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9619.
Bill number 9619, an ordinance concerning licensing swimming pools lifeguards.
Is there any further discussion? No, thank you. I think we're ready.
I didn't bring my binder up, so.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9619.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Bill number 9619 is passed.
Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution number 120.
Resolution number 120, resolution confirming the appointment of a member of the classified service to serve on the Pension Oversight Commission for Anne Arundel County.
This is sponsored by the administration. Ms. Kaylee Schultz, would you like to elaborate?
Thank you. Resolution 120 appoints Kelly Lovett as a member of the Classified Service to serve on the Pension Oversight Commission. Ms. Lovett is a senior personnel analyst in the Department of Personnel and meets the requirements to be on the Pension Oversight Commission. She will be filling a vacant spot on the commission that was previously served by Bill DeHoff, who was elected to the Retirement and Pension System Board of Trustees. If approved, Ms. Lovett will serve a term ending on January 31st of 2024. You should have her resume in front of you.
Are there any questions from my colleagues? We'll now open the public hearing for remarks. Will be limited to 2 minutes. I do not have anyone signed up. I'm not seeing any movement in the audience. We'll now close the public hearing on Resolution 120. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution 120.
Resolution 120, resolution confirming the appointment of a member of the classified service to serve on the Pension Oversight Commission for Anne Arundel County.
Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 120.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Resolution number 120 is adopted.
Is there any other business to be brought before the County Council this evening?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The County Council is adjourned until February 3rd, 2020.